My husband convinced me to quit my job, then filed for divorce, leaving me with nothing. The absolutely crushing betrayal I'm experiencing right now has shown me that my husband of 16 years systematically manipulated me into leaving my successful marketing career by claiming he wanted me home with our kids, then immediately filed for divorce once I'd been unemployed for the mandatory waiting period that would minimize his alimony obligations. I'm Sarah, 42, and I'm devastated. 6 months ago, James started this campaign about family priorities. He earned $180,000 as a software manager, while I made $95,000 in marketing. He kept saying our teenagers needed me home more, that we could afford it on his salary, that my career stress was affecting our marriage. I was hesitant, but he was so persuasive about putting family first. I quit my job in January. James filed for divorce in March, exactly after the 3-month window that minimized spousal support under our state's laws. His attorney had clearly calculated this timing. The divorce papers cited irreconcilable differences, with no mention of the pressure campaign to get me to quit. Now I'm 42, unemployed for 6 months with a resume gap, facing a competitive job market in my field where I'm older than most candidates. The spousal support calculation is brutal, based partly on the income disparity at time of filing when I had 0 income versus his $180,000. My attorney says I should have kept working. James had been planning this for months. I found emails to his lawyer from last summer discussing optimal timing for filing. He deliberately waited until I'd quit and been unemployed long enough to establish a pattern. He sacrificed my career and earning potential to reduce his divorce costs. Our kids are 15 and 13, old enough they didn't need me home. James's family-first rhetoric was purely manipulation to engineer my financial vulnerability before divorcing me. I trusted him and destroyed my career on his advice, and he used that vulnerability against me in divorce proceedings. I'm fighting for better support terms, but the damage is done. I'm middle-aged, unemployed, and facing rebuilding a career I had to explain abandoning. James is living comfortably on his salary while I struggle to figure out how to survive. The person I trusted most calculated how to leave me with nothing. My wife and daughter conspired to have me arrested on false domestic violence charges. The nightmare I barely survived 7 months ago has exposed that my wife of 24 years, Carol, and our 22-year-old daughter, Brittany, conspired to fabricate domestic violence allegations against me, complete with staged photos of injuries and coached false testimony, so Carol could get an immediate restraining order, force me out of our house, and file for divorce with maximum financial advantage while I was facing criminal charges. I'm Dennis, 49 years old, and I thought I had a stable marriage despite some recent tensions. Carol and I had been arguing about finances. She'd been spending beyond our means, and I'd suggested we needed a budget. Our daughter Brittany had been living at home after graduating college, unemployed, and showing no urgency about finding work. I'd told Carol we needed to push Brittany to get a job and start contributing. These normal marital disagreements apparently triggered Carol and Brittany to plan my destruction. One evening, I came home from work to find police waiting. Carol and Brittany claimed I'd assaulted them both that morning before work. They showed officers photos of bruises on Carol's arms and a scratch on Brittany's face. They provided detailed, matching statements about me grabbing Carol, shoving her against a wall, and scratching Brittany when she tried to intervene. None of it happened. I'd left for work that morning after a completely normal breakfast. There had been no argument, no physical contact, nothing remotely resembling what they described. But the police arrested me anyway, based on their coordinated statements and the photographic evidence of injuries. I spent the night in jail before posting bail. A temporary restraining order was immediately issued, prohibiting me from returning home or contacting Carol or Brittany. Carol filed for divorce within 48 hours, and her attorney used the domestic violence allegations to argue for exclusive possession of our house, maximum spousal support, and favorable asset division. I hired a criminal defense attorney who immediately identified problems with Carol and Brittany's story. The timeline didn't work. They claimed I'd assaulted them at 7 a.m., but my work entry logs showed me arriving at my office at 7:15 a.m., a 30-minute drive away. There was no way I could have committed the assault they described and arrived at work when I did. My attorney hired a forensic photograph expert who examined the injury photos. The expert determined the bruises on Carol were inconsistent with fresh injuries. The coloring and patterns indicated they were 2-3 days old when photographed, not from the morning they claimed. The scratch on Brittany's face was superficial and appeared self-inflicted based on the angle and depth. The criminal investigation intensified as my attorney uncovered more evidence of fabrication. Text messages between Carol and Brittany from days before the alleged assault showed them discussing how to get rid of Dennis and make him leave the house. One message from Carol to Brittany said, "We need something that will get him arrested and out immediately. DV will work." Security camera footage from a neighbor captured Carol and Brittany in our backyard the evening before the alleged assault. The footage showed Brittany grabbing Carol's arms forcefully, apparently creating the bruises they later photographed. Another clip showed Brittany apparently scratching her own face with her fingernails. They'd staged the injuries the night before, then called police the next morning, claiming I'd just assaulted them. My attorney also uncovered financial motives. Carol had been having an affair with a coworker and wanted to divorce, but knew our prenuptial agreement heavily favored me in case of her infidelity. By claiming domestic violence instead, she could override the prenup provisions and seek more favorable terms. Brittany apparently participated because Carol had promised her she could have my car and continue living rent-free in the house if they successfully got me removed. The district attorney dropped all criminal charges once presented with the evidence of fabrication. The prosecutor was furious that Carol and Brittany had wasted law enforcement resources on false allegations and expressed concern about the damage false reports do to actual domestic violence victims. The DA's office referred Carol and Brittany for criminal prosecution for filing false reports and conspiracy. But despite the criminal charges being dropped, the damage to me was severe. I'd spent thousands on bail and attorneys. My reputation was damaged. Coworkers and neighbors had heard about domestic violence allegations before learning they were false. I'd been barred from my own home for months. The restraining order had been publicly filed, showing up in background checks even after being dismissed. Carol's divorce attorney initially tried to proceed as if the domestic violence claims were still valid, even after criminal charges were dropped and evidence of fabrication emerged. My attorney had to fight to get the family court to acknowledge that the foundational allegations were proven false. Carol eventually agreed to dismiss the restraining order, but she'd gotten months of exclusive possession of our house while I paid for temporary housing. The family court judge was disturbed by evidence that Carol and Brittany had fabricated abuse allegations. The judge sanctioned Carol's attorney for continuing to rely on dismissed charges and made clear that proven false allegations would be considered in divorce proceedings. Carol's affair also came out during discovery, triggering the prenup's infidelity provisions that she'd tried to avoid by claiming abuse. 8 months after being arrested on fabricated charges, I'm watching Carol and Brittany face criminal prosecution for false reporting, while my divorce proceeds on terms far more favorable to me than Carol had planned. But the emotional and reputational damage can't be undone, and the fact that my own wife and daughter coordinated to falsely accuse me of domestic violence is a betrayal I'll never fully process. Carol has been charged with filing a false police report, conspiracy, and perjury for her sworn statements. Brittany faces similar charges. Their attorney is trying to negotiate plea deals to avoid trial, but prosecutors are insisting on jail time given the premeditated nature of the false accusations and the serious harm they caused. Making false domestic violence allegations undermines real victims and wastes resources, prosecutors have said, and must have serious consequences. The divorce settlement heavily favors me due to Carol's infidelity triggering prenup provisions, and the court's consideration of her fabricated abuse allegations. I'm retaining our house, receiving favorable asset division, and paying minimal temporary support. Carol is facing the exact opposite of what she'd hoped to achieve with her false accusations. Brittany's relationship with me is destroyed. My daughter coordinated with her mother to have me arrested on false charges so she could get my car and avoid getting a job. The level of entitlement and malice that required is incomprehensible. Brittany has sent messages claiming she was just supporting Mom and didn't understand the seriousness. But video evidence shows her staging her own injuries, and text messages show her actively planning the scheme. My reputation in the community has been difficult to fully restore. Even after charges were dropped and the fabrication was exposed, some people still harbor doubts. False accusations of abuse leave lingering suspicion even after being proven false. I've had to explain to employers, friends, and neighbors what actually happened, which means repeatedly reliving the trauma of being falsely accused. The financial cost has been substantial, approximately $85,000 in criminal defense and divorce attorney fees. Even though I'll eventually recover some of those costs through favorable divorce settlement, I still had to pay them up front during months when I was also covering temporary housing because I'd been barred from my own home based on false allegations. Carol's affair partner has apparently ended their relationship after learning she'd fabricated abuse allegations against her husband. The coworker told someone that he couldn't trust someone capable of making false criminal accusations, which at least shows some people recognize the severity of what Carol did. I'm sharing this story as a warning that false domestic violence allegations are devastating weapons that some people are willing to use in divorce and custody battles. They create immediate legal consequences for the accused: arrest, restraining orders, loss of housing, before any evidence is examined. Even after being proven false, the damage lingers. If you're facing suspicious allegations during contentious divorce proceedings, document everything, preserve evidence of your whereabouts, and hire attorneys who understand false accusation defense immediately. Carol and Brittany calculated that false abuse allegations would get me arrested and removed from our house immediately, giving Carol advantage in divorce proceedings. They created fake injuries, coordinated stories, and filed police reports knowing they were lying. They were willing to destroy me legally, financially, and reputationally to get what they wanted. That they're now facing criminal prosecution is appropriate, but it doesn't undo the months of nightmare I endured being publicly accused of abuse I never committed by my own wife and daughter. My adult children forged my will to cut out their half-siblings from my first marriage. The devastating legal fraud I uncovered 6 weeks ago has exposed that my 3 adult children from my second marriage created a forged will in my name that disinherits my 2 children from my first marriage, and they were apparently planning to submit this fake document upon my death to steal their half-siblings' rightful inheritance. I'm Daniel, 56 years old, and I have 5 adult children total: 2 from my first marriage to Janet, Tyler, 32, and Morgan, 29, and 3 from my current marriage to Paula, Jessica, 24, Brandon, 22, and Kylie, 20. I've always tried to treat all my children equally, despite the complicated family dynamics. My legitimate will divides my estate, worth approximately $850,000, equally among all 5 children, giving each 20%. I discovered the forgery completely by accident. I'd been looking for tax documents in my home office and found a folder labeled Dad's Will in a filing cabinet I'd assumed contained only Paula's craft supplies. Inside was a will document that looked superficially like mine, same attorney letterhead, similar language, but with one critical difference. It left everything to Jessica, Brandon, and Kylie, with no mention of Tyler and Morgan. The signature was a decent forgery of mine. The witness signatures were people I didn't recognize. The document was dated 6 months ago, which would technically supersede my actual will from 3 years ago if I had actually signed it. Someone had gone to considerable effort to create a convincing fake that would stand up to cursory examination after my death. I immediately called my actual estate attorney, who confirmed she'd never prepared any such document. We compared the forgery to my legitimate will and identified numerous small differences in language and formatting that proved the forged will wasn't from her office, despite the copied letterhead. I confronted Paula, who claimed she knew nothing about any fake will. But her reaction was off. She wasn't surprised or outraged, just defensive and evasive. When I pushed, she finally admitted that Jessica, Brandon, and Kylie had created the document just as a backup plan in case I ever changed my mind about leaving money to Tyler and Morgan. That made no sense. A forged will isn't a backup plan. It's fraud. Paula kept insisting the kids hadn't meant any harm. They were just protecting their interests, because Tyler and Morgan already got child support years ago and didn't deserve equal inheritance. I hired a forensic document examiner who confirmed the will was fraudulent. The signature was traced from a legitimate document. The paper was purchased recently, despite the dated document, and the witness signatures appeared to be created by the same person using different writing styles. This was premeditated forgery, not a childish prank. I confronted Jessica, Brandon, and Kylie together. Initially, they tried to deny creating the document, claiming they'd found it and were keeping it safe for me. But when I told them I had forensic analysis proving it was forged, they fell apart. Jessica admitted they'd created it 6 months ago, believing I'd die soon after a health scare I'd had, and wanting to ensure Tyler and Morgan didn't take what wasn't theirs. Their justification was that Tyler and Morgan's mother had already gotten plenty in the divorce settlement 25 years ago, so those kids didn't deserve to inherit from me. They genuinely believed they were entitled to my entire estate because their mother was my current wife, while my first family deserved nothing because we'd divorced decades ago. The entitlement was staggering. They'd planned to wait until I died, then submit the forged will to probate and let Tyler and Morgan discover they'd been written out. They'd apparently assumed Tyler and Morgan wouldn't challenge it, or that if they did, the forgery would be difficult to prove. They'd been willing to steal potentially $340,000 from their half-siblings through fraud. I reported the forgery to police. The detective explained that will forgery is a serious felony. It's both fraud and identity theft. Jessica, Brandon, and Kylie could face criminal charges. The DA's office was reviewing whether to prosecute. Paula begged me not to press charges against our children, claiming they were young and had made a mistake. But they were 24, 22, and 20, adults old enough to understand that forgery is illegal. And this wasn't impulsive. It was planned over months, requiring researching legal documents, practicing my signature, creating fake witnesses, and hiding the evidence where I might not find it before death. Tyler and Morgan were shocked when I told them about the forgery. They'd never had great relationships with their half-siblings. Jessica, Brandon, and Kylie had always been somewhat resentful that Dad had a first family. But they'd never imagined their half-siblings were planning to defraud them. My relationship with Paula has been severely damaged. She's defending our children's fraud while I see it as attempted theft from my other children. She keeps saying I'm overreacting and tearing the family apart by involving police. I've told her that Jessica, Brandon, and Kylie tore the family apart when they committed felony forgery. 2 months after discovering the forged will, my family is in ruins. Jessica, Brandon, and Kylie have been charged with conspiracy to commit fraud and forgery. They're facing potential felony convictions and prison time. Paula has retained a criminal defense attorney for them, using her own inheritance from her parents, which means she's spending tens of thousands defending them against charges stemming from their attempt to steal from my other children. I've updated my legitimate will with additional anti-fraud provisions. The new will explicitly states that any attempt to submit forged documents will result in complete disinheritance of the party attempting fraud. If Jessica, Brandon, and Kylie, or anyone acting on their behalf, submits the fake will after my death, they forfeit their entire inheritance, which would be redistributed to Tyler and Morgan. I've also had the forged document placed in a bank safety deposit box with instructions to my executor and copies provided to Tyler and Morgan. If someone tries to probate the fake will after I die, there's clear evidence of its fraudulent nature and instructions for how to handle challenges. Paula and I are likely divorcing. She's made clear she prioritizes protecting Jessica, Brandon, and Kylie over holding them accountable for fraud. She's claimed I'm choosing Tyler and Morgan over our family by reporting the forgery. The framing that addressing fraud against some of my children means abandoning others is twisted, but it reflects Paula's view that only her children count as real family. The criminal case is proceeding. Jessica, Brandon, and Kylie's attorney is trying to negotiate plea deals to avoid trial in prison. The DA is considering offers, but wants some jail time given the premeditated nature of the fraud. My testimony about discovering the forged will and my forensic expert's analysis will be critical to the prosecution. Tyler and Morgan have been supportive, though they're uncomfortable with their half-siblings facing criminal charges. They've said they don't want anyone going to prison. They just want assurance their inheritance rights are protected. I've assured them my legitimate will stands, and the forgery plot has failed. But I won't drop the criminal complaint because forgery needs consequences. I'm 56 years old, watching 3 of my children face felony charges for trying to steal from my other 2 children through will forgery. My second marriage is ending because my wife defended fraud rather than demanding accountability. The family I thought I'd built is revealed to have been built on resentment and entitlement rather than genuine bonds. I'm sharing this story as a warning. Keep your estate documents secure and make sure multiple trusted people have copies. Will fraud by family members is more common than people realize, and usually isn't discovered until after death, when it's harder to prove. I was lucky to find the forgery while alive, but many victims don't discover until it's too late to seek justice. My adult son staged a break-in at my house to steal my deceased wife's jewelry. The heart-wrenching theft I discovered 3 weeks ago has shown me that my 28-year-old son Marcus orchestrated a fake burglary at my home, making it appear like a random break-in while he specifically targeted and stole his late mother's jewelry collection, worth approximately $85,000 that I'd been safeguarding for his younger sister until her upcoming wedding. I'm Thomas, 55 years old, and my wife Rebecca died from ovarian cancer 2 years ago at age 52. Before she died, Rebecca gave me explicit instructions about her jewelry, her engagement ring, wedding band, and a collection of pieces she'd inherited from her grandmother should go to our daughter Emma, 25, who's getting married in 6 months. Rebecca had made me promise multiple times that Emma would receive all the jewelry when she got engaged. Marcus has always been the troubled child compared to Emma. He's had legal issues, struggled with substance abuse, been fired from multiple jobs, and constantly needs money. I've helped him repeatedly over the years, paid for rehab twice, covered rent when he was evicted, gave him $15,000 for a business opportunity that went nowhere. Emma has been responsible, finished college, has a stable career and fiancé. 3 weeks ago, I came home from work to find my back door forced open and my bedroom ransacked. The police came, took a report, and noted that only my bedroom had been targeted. My electronics were untouched. My wallet on the kitchen counter was still there. But Rebecca's jewelry box was gone from my closet shelf. The jewelry box had contained about $85,000 worth of pieces, including her 2-carat diamond engagement ring. The police said it looked like someone knew exactly what they wanted and where to find it. They asked if anyone besides me knew where I kept Rebecca's jewelry. I mentioned that Marcus and Emma both knew, but I told them Marcus would never do this. Emma was on vacation with her fiancé, so she had an alibi. Marcus claimed he'd been at work during the burglary window, but the investigating detective was skeptical. The forced entry looked staged, pry marks on the door were superficial, and the lock wasn't actually damaged in ways consistent with forced entry. There were no fingerprints, which was unusual, and security camera footage from my neighbor showed Marcus's car parked on my street around the time of the burglary, despite him claiming he was at work. The detective interviewed Marcus's employer and discovered Marcus had called in sick that day. He'd lied about being at work. Confronted with this information and the security footage, Marcus initially claimed he'd stopped by my house to check on me and had found the door already broken. But his story fell apart under questioning. He couldn't explain why he hadn't called police or called me about finding a break-in, why he'd lied about being at work, or why his car was there for 40 minutes during the exact window the burglary occurred. Eventually, Marcus confessed. He'd staged the break-in and stolen his mother's jewelry. He claimed he needed money desperately. He owed $28,000 to various creditors and was facing lawsuits. He'd planned to sell the jewelry, pay his debts, and claim some random burglar had taken it. He'd thought I'd never suspect him, and that insurance would cover the loss, so no one would really be hurt. His rationalization was obscene. The jewelry wasn't just valuable. It was his late mother's, meant for his sister, as Rebecca had explicitly requested. Marcus had stolen Emma's inheritance from her dead mother to pay debts he'd accumulated through irresponsibility. He'd violated his mother's dying wishes and betrayed my trust, all because he couldn't manage money or face consequences of his own choices. Marcus was arrested and charged with burglary and theft. The DA said that even though this was theft from a family member, the staged break-in and the value involved made this a serious felony. Marcus was looking at potentially 2 to 5 years in prison. Marcus's attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal where Marcus would return the jewelry and receive probation. But Marcus had already sold most of it to various pawn shops and jewelry buyers. He'd gotten approximately $38,000 for $85,000 worth of jewelry by selling it quickly to fences who didn't ask questions. Much of it was irreplaceable. Rebecca's grandmother's vintage pieces, items with sentimental value that could never be recovered. I managed to recover Rebecca's engagement ring from a pawn shop by paying $5,500, more than what the pawn shop had paid Marcus for it, but less than its actual value. That ring, at least, could go to Emma. But the wedding band, the grandmother's pearls, the Art Deco bracelet Rebecca had loved, those were gone, sold to buyers who've since resold them or melted them down. Emma was devastated when she learned what Marcus had done. She'd already been struggling with her mother's death and was looking forward to wearing Rebecca's jewelry at her wedding as a way to honor her memory. Marcus had stolen that connection, that tangible link to their mother, for gambling debts and credit card bills. 1 month after discovering Marcus staged the burglary, he's facing felony charges, and our family is shattered. Emma refuses to speak to Marcus or attend any family event where he might be present. She's told me she considers Marcus dead to her. Someone who'd steal their dead mother's jewelry meant for his sister's wedding is no longer her brother. I'm caught between my children, my son, who's facing prison for stealing from our family, and my daughter, who's been robbed of her mother's jewelry and her brother's integrity. I testified at Marcus's preliminary hearing about Rebecca's wishes for the jewelry and confirmed that Marcus knew it was meant for Emma. My testimony likely helped prosecutors establish the severity of the theft. Marcus's attorney is trying to paint him as an addict whose judgment was impaired by substance abuse. There's truth to Marcus having struggled with addiction, but this theft was calculated and premeditated. He researched how to stage a break-in. He planned his alibi. He waited until Emma was on vacation, so he'd be the only suspect cleared if anyone was suspicious. This was deliberate crime, not impaired judgment. The financial loss is significant, but the emotional damage is worse. Marcus destroyed what remained of our family after Rebecca's death. Emma's wedding will be missing both her mother and her brother, one to death, one to betrayal and incarceration. I'll walk Emma down the aisle alone, trying to fill the role of both parents, while Marcus sits in prison for stealing the jewelry that should have been gracing Emma's hand. Marcus has written me letters from jail claiming he's sorry and asking me to support him getting probation instead of prison. He says prison will ruin his life and he needs another chance. But I've told his attorney I won't support lenient sentencing. Marcus had countless chances. Rehab I paid for, rent I covered, the $15,000 I gave him, legal help I provided for previous minor offenses. He repaid my support by stealing his dead mother's jewelry to pay gambling debts. I've had to accept that my son is not the person I wished him to be. Marcus is a thief who'd violate his mother's dying wishes and destroy his sister's inheritance for money he'd waste anyway. Emma was right to cut him off. He's proven he'll betray anyone, even family, even his own mother's memory, when it serves his immediate needs. The jewelry that can be recovered will go to Emma, though much of the collection is lost forever. I'm supplementing what I recovered by giving Emma some of my own savings to purchase jewelry for her wedding. Not the same as wearing her mother's pieces, but something to mark the occasion. It's inadequate compensation for what Marcus stole, but it's what I can do. I'm sharing this story as a warning. Protect valuable family heirlooms, even from adult children who you think would never steal from family. Get a safety deposit box, install security systems. Don't assume family loyalty will protect precious items. Marcus's addiction and financial irresponsibility made him willing to betray his deceased mother's wishes and his living sister's inheritance. People in desperate financial situations will sometimes do unconscionable things, and being family doesn't make you immune from being victimized by their choices. My brother stole my identity to start a business that failed, leaving me with $200,000 debt. The financially catastrophic identity theft I discovered 4 months ago has exposed that my younger brother Kevin, who I'd helped support through years of failed ventures and unemployment, used my personal information to open business accounts, credit lines, and loans totaling over $200,000 that he ran up before the business collapsed, leaving me responsible for massive debt I never authorized, while he declared personal bankruptcy to avoid responsibility. I'm Michael, 51, and Kevin is 47. I've always been the successful brother, stable career in finance, good credit, homeowner, disciplined saver. Kevin has bounced between jobs and failed business ideas his whole adult life. I've helped him repeatedly over the years, letting him live with me rent-free twice, lending him money he never repaid, co-signing an apartment lease when he had no credit. Last year, Kevin excitedly told me about a new business concept, an online retail venture he'd developed. He showed me business plans and projections that looked decent for once. He said he was finally getting serious and this would be his breakthrough. I was cautiously optimistic and supportive, though I declined when he asked me to invest or co-sign loans, having learned from past experiences not to mix family and finances. 4 months ago, I started getting calls from collection agencies about business debts I supposedly owed. I told them they had the wrong person. I'd never opened these accounts. But they had my name, social security number, and address. I pulled my credit report and was horrified to find $200,000 in business debt across multiple accounts opened in my name over the previous 18 months. The accounts were for Kevin's retail business. He'd used my identity to apply for business credit cards, lines of credit, equipment leases, and even an SBA loan. He'd forged my signature on countless documents. He'd listed me as the business owner and principal, while actually running operations himself. Every single application had been fraudulent identity theft. Kevin's business had failed spectacularly after burning through $200,000. He'd overestimated demand, underestimated costs, and made numerous poor decisions. When the business collapsed, creditors started pursuing the person listed on the accounts, me. Kevin had meanwhile filed personal bankruptcy, claiming he had no assets and listing no business debts, since technically none were in his name. I confronted Kevin and he admitted everything. He claimed he'd planned to build the business successfully and pay everything off before I ever knew, so it wouldn't really affect me. When I pointed out he'd committed serious felonies, Kevin said family should help family, and I was being selfish for not understanding he was desperate. I reported Kevin to police for identity theft. The detective said this was one of the most extensive family identity theft cases he'd seen. $200,000 across multiple accounts over 18 months showed systematic fraud, not a momentary mistake. Kevin was arrested and charged with identity theft, fraud, and forgery. Kevin's defense attorney is trying to argue that there was some implicit family understanding that I'd help with his business, that Kevin believed he had permission to use my credit. This is completely false. I'd explicitly declined to invest or co-sign anything. Kevin's attorney is trying to muddy the water, claiming family dynamics are complicated and Kevin misunderstood boundaries. Meanwhile, I'm fighting creditors who insist I'm responsible for the debts. Some have been receptive to identity theft documentation and have removed the fraudulent accounts. Others are fighting, claiming I should have monitored my credit and caught the fraud earlier, or suggesting I must have known since Kevin is family. Several creditors have already filed lawsuits against me for the debts. I've had to hire 2 attorneys, a criminal attorney to support prosecution of Kevin, and a civil attorney to fight the creditors and clear my credit. Legal fees are already over $45,000 and climbing. My credit score plummeted from 780 to 510 due to the delinquent accounts Kevin opened. I've had mortgage refinancing denied, been rejected for a car loan, and even had my credit card limits reduced because I'm now considered high risk. The financial impact extends beyond the fraudulent debt itself. I'd planned to sell my house and downsize next year, but the credit damage makes that impossible now. I can't qualify for a new mortgage. I've had to delay retirement plans because I need to keep working to pay legal fees and to rebuild finances once this is resolved. Kevin's identity theft has cost me years of financial progress. My family is divided on how to handle this. My mother thinks I'm being cruel to prosecute Kevin, saying, "He's your brother," and I should drop charges. I've told her Kevin committed serious crimes that destroyed my credit and left me with $200,000 in fraudulent debt. This goes beyond normal family disputes. My sister supports me, having had her own negative experiences with Kevin borrowing money and never repaying it. Kevin's girlfriend, not wife, thankfully, has sent me hostile messages, accusing me of destroying Kevin's life by pressing charges. She claims Kevin is depressed and suicidal over the legal consequences. I've told her that Kevin destroyed his own life by committing felonies, and that depression doesn't erase responsibility for stealing my identity and accumulating $200,000 in fraudulent debt in my name. 6 months after discovering Kevin's identity theft, the criminal case is proceeding toward trial, and I'm still fighting to clear the fraudulent debt. Kevin faces potentially 8 to 12 years in prison for the extent of the fraud. His attorney is trying to negotiate a plea deal that would include restitution, but Kevin has no assets or income to pay restitution. He's living with our mother and working part-time at a warehouse. I've successfully gotten about $85,000 of the debt removed by providing identity theft documentation to creditors. The remaining $115,000 is still being fought. Some creditors are more difficult and require court judgments to remove fraudulent accounts. My attorney says we'll eventually win, but it takes time and money to fight each creditor individually. My credit score has recovered slightly to 590 as fraudulent accounts are removed, but it will take years to fully recover. The identity theft remains on my credit report even after accounts are removed, and many lenders are wary of someone who's been the victim of such extensive fraud. I'm essentially financially tainted by Kevin's crimes, even though I was the victim. The relationship with Kevin is permanently destroyed. I haven't spoken to him since the initial confrontation. He occasionally sends messages through family members, asking me to drop charges or claiming he's gotten help and changed. But there's no coming back from using your brother's identity to commit $200,000 in fraud, then filing bankruptcy to avoid responsibility while leaving your brother with the debt. My mother's insistence that I should forgive Kevin, because family, has damaged our relationship too. She can't seem to understand the severity of what Kevin did. This wasn't borrowing $20 and forgetting to pay it back. This was systematic identity theft that has financially devastated me. Her continued defense of Kevin, while minimizing the impact on me, has made me distance myself from her as well. The trial is scheduled for next month. I'll testify about discovering the fraud, about explicitly declining to be involved in Kevin's business, and about the financial damage I've suffered. My testimony will be critical to proving Kevin acted knowingly and maliciously, rather than under some misguided belief he had permission. Kevin's attorney has floated the idea of a plea deal, where Kevin would plead guilty to reduced charges in exchange for a shorter sentence and agreeing to restitution. But any restitution order would be meaningless. Kevin has no money and no realistic ability to repay $200,000. The criminal conviction matters more than restitution I'll never actually receive. I'm sharing this story as a warning. Protect your personal information even from family members. Monitor your credit report regularly and respond immediately to any suspicious inquiries. Kevin was able to steal my identity because he had access to my social security number, birth date, and other personal information from years of being family. He exploited family trust to commit fraud that has cost me years of financial progress and tens of thousands in legal fees. The brother I helped repeatedly over the years, who I housed and supported and lent money to, repaid me by stealing my identity and destroying my credit. Kevin's pattern of irresponsibility and failed ventures escalated to serious felonies when he decided my credit was the solution to his inability to qualify for business financing himself. Now he'll face prison, while I spend years cleaning up the financial wreckage of his crimes. My daughter accused me of abuse to gain control of my elderly mother's estate. The horrifying legal nightmare I've been enduring for 5 months began when my 24-year-old daughter Stephanie filed false abuse allegations against me with Adult Protective Services, claiming I was neglecting and financially exploiting my 81-year-old mother, all to position herself as my mother's caregiver and gain access to the $600,000 estate I was managing as power of attorney. I'm Rebecca, 52 years old, and I've been my mother's primary caregiver for 3 years since her Alzheimer's diagnosis. I left my job as a paralegal to care for her full-time because she needed constant supervision. My mother had given me power of attorney years ago when she was still competent, trusting me to manage her finances and healthcare decisions. Stephanie moved back home 8 months ago after losing her apartment, supposedly to help with grandma. But her help consisted of occasional visits while I handled all actual caregiving: medications, meals, bathing, doctor appointments, managing the in-home aide I'd hired with Mom's funds. Stephanie spent most of her time in her room or out with friends. 3 months ago, Stephanie asked me to give her $30,000 from my mother's accounts for a business opportunity. I refused, explaining the money was for Mom's care and I had fiduciary duties. Stephanie became enraged, saying it was Grandma's money, and she should be able to use it. I explained that's not how power of attorney works. The money is for the benefit of the person, not the family. Last month, APS showed up at my door. Stephanie had filed a complaint claiming I was neglecting my mother, not feeding her properly, denying her medical care, keeping her isolated. She also claimed I was stealing Mom's money for my own use. APS launched a full investigation. They interviewed my mother, who, due to Alzheimer's, gave confused and inconsistent answers. They reviewed Mom's medical records and finances. They interviewed the home health aide, Mom's doctors, and neighbors. Eventually, they found the allegations were completely unfounded. Mom was receiving excellent care, and her finances showed appropriate spending on her needs. But the damage was done. I'd spent $15,000 on an elder law attorney to defend against the allegations. My reputation in our small town was damaged by the investigation. And most devastatingly, Stephanie had filed a petition with the court to remove me as power of attorney and have herself appointed as Mom's guardian, claiming the APS investigation proved I was unfit. The guardianship hearing was a nightmare. Stephanie presented a completely fabricated narrative of my supposed neglect and financial exploitation. She claimed I'd isolated Mom from family, had refused to let Stephanie visit, and was hoarding Mom's money while providing substandard care. None of it was true. Stephanie had unlimited access to visit, and I'd been spending Mom's money appropriately on her 24-hour care needs. Stephanie had recruited her boyfriend and 2 friends to testify that they'd witnessed me being short-tempered and dismissive with my mother. These were people who'd been to my house maybe 3 times total and had never observed me providing care. They were lying to support Stephanie's custody grab, probably with promises she'd share Mom's money with them. My attorney presented the APS findings that completely exonerated me. We presented testimony from Mom's doctors confirming excellent care. The home health aide testified that I was devoted and attentive. My attorney presented detailed financial records showing every penny of Mom's money had been spent appropriately on her care, housing, and medical needs. We also exposed Stephanie's financial motive: her request for $30,000 that I'd refused, her lack of employment, her mounting debts. My attorney argued this was clearly a scheme to remove me as power of attorney so Stephanie could access Mom's estate for her own use. The judge ruled in my favor, keeping me as power of attorney and dismissing Stephanie's guardianship petition. But the judge noted the concerning family dynamics and ordered regular accounting of Mom's finances to the court, a humiliating oversight that wouldn't have been necessary if Stephanie hadn't made false accusations. Stephanie's response to losing was to escalate. She filed a police report claiming I'd stolen $50,000 from Mom's accounts. The police investigation found no evidence of theft. The money had been spent on legitimate care expenses with documentation. But I had to hire a criminal defense attorney just in case prosecutors decided to pursue charges. She also started a social media campaign claiming I was abusing my elderly mother and keeping her prisoner. She posted on Facebook claiming I'd refused to let family see their grandmother and was draining her life savings. People who didn't know the full situation believed her. I received hostile messages from distant relatives I barely knew. My mother, who has good days and bad days with her Alzheimer's, was caught in the middle. On her bad days, she didn't understand why Stephanie was suddenly visiting frequently and asking questions about me. On her good days, she was distressed that her daughter and granddaughter were fighting. 6 months after this nightmare began, Stephanie has finally been forced to accept she won't get control of Mom's estate while I'm alive. But the damage to our family is permanent. I've had to ban Stephanie from our house because she was using visits with Mom to interrogate her about finances and to record videos she'd then edit to make me look neglectful. I obtained a restraining order after Stephanie showed up at Mom's doctor's appointment claiming she was there to ensure proper care was being provided. The restraining order prohibits Stephanie from contacting Mom, me, or any of Mom's healthcare providers. It was necessary but heartbreaking, legally barring my own daughter from seeing her grandmother. The financial cost has been devastating. Between the elder law attorney, the criminal defense attorney, and court costs, I've spent over $35,000 of my own savings defending against Stephanie's false accusations. I had to take that money from my retirement account, setting back my own future security. Stephanie has moved in with her boyfriend and continues her social media campaign, now claiming I've turned grandma against her own granddaughter with the restraining order. She posts photos from years ago of her with Mom, captioned with accusations that I'm keeping them apart. People who don't know the truth believe I'm the villain. My mother's condition continues deteriorating. She has maybe a couple of years left based on her disease progression. When she dies, her estate will be divided equally between me and Stephanie, per the will she created 20 years ago. Stephanie will receive $300,000 despite everything she's done, because Mom's will was written when Stephanie was a child and hasn't been updated. The worst part is that Stephanie destroyed our relationship permanently over money she's going to inherit anyway. If she'd just been patient and let me continue caring for Mom, she'd have received her inheritance in a few years. Instead, she's put me through hell, damaged my reputation, cost me tens of thousands in legal fees, and ensured I'll never speak to her again. All for nothing. I'm telling this story as a warning to other caregivers. Document everything. Keep meticulous records of finances and care provided. Record conversations if necessary. Because family members who feel entitled to an inheritance will sometimes weaponize abuse allegations to remove obstacles to accessing money. And defending yourself is expensive and emotionally devastating even when you've done nothing wrong. My daughter turned my grandchildren against me with lies so she could control my estate. The heartbreaking alienation I've suffered for the past year has revealed that my daughter Nicole, 38, has been systematically poisoning my relationship with my 3 grandchildren by telling them I'm abusive, racist, and dangerous, all to isolate me from the family so she can manipulate me into changing my will to give her everything instead of splitting my estate equally with her brother. I'm Margaret, 62, and I have 2 adult children, Nicole and my son Paul, 40. I've always been a devoted grandmother to Nicole's 3 kids, Emma, 12, Lucas, 9, and Sophie, 6. I was deeply involved in their lives, seeing them weekly, attending school events, taking them on trips. They were the center of my retirement life after my husband died 3 years ago. About 18 months ago, Nicole started making strange comments about how I needed to update my estate planning, since Paul lived out of state and wasn't really part of the family anymore. My will currently splits my $850,000 estate equally between Nicole and Paul. Nicole started suggesting Paul didn't deserve equal inheritance since he'd moved away, and I was closer to her and her kids. I told Nicole my will was staying as written. Both my children would inherit equally. Nicole became visibly angry and said it was unfair that Paul would get the same as her when she was the one caring for me and providing grandchildren. I was taken aback by her entitlement and ended the conversation by saying my estate planning wasn't up for discussion. Shortly after that conversation, Nicole stopped bringing the kids to visit. When I asked why, she claimed they were busy with activities. I offered to attend their events or pick them up myself, but Nicole made excuses. The kids were tired, had homework, weren't feeling well. Over months, my contact with my grandchildren dwindled from weekly visits to nothing. I tried calling and texting the kids directly, but they stopped responding. I sent birthday and Christmas gifts that were never acknowledged. I showed up at Emma's school play and waved to her, but she turned away and wouldn't speak to me. It was like my grandchildren had been instructed to cut me off completely. Through a mutual friend, I learned Nicole had been telling the children I was dangerous and had treated their mother badly when she was young. Nicole claimed I'd been emotionally abusive, had said racist things, and was now losing my mind in old age. None of this was true. I'd been a loving parent and grandmother, but the children believed their mother. I hired a family therapist who specializes in grandparent alienation to help me understand what was happening. The therapist reviewed the timeline and Nicole's behavior and concluded this was deliberate parental alienation. Nicole was systematically destroying my relationship with my grandchildren to punish me for not changing my will and to isolate me emotionally. The therapist explained that alienating parents often tell children that the targeted grandparent is dangerous or abusive to justify withholding access. Nicole had created a false narrative that I was racist. Her children are biracial, their father is black, making this accusation particularly hurtful, and had been a bad mother, so the children would accept being kept from me. I learned through another family member that Nicole had also told the children I was developing dementia and would say crazy things if they talked to me. This was apparently Nicole's preemptive excuse in case I told the children the truth. Anything I said would be dismissed as confusion from dementia I don't actually have. I consulted with a family law attorney about grandparent visitation rights. The attorney explained that in our state, grandparents have limited legal rights, and courts are reluctant to override parental decisions about access to children. I could file for court-ordered visitation, but I'd need to prove that denial of access was harming the children, which is difficult when children have been coached to say they don't want to see the grandparent. Meanwhile, Nicole ramped up pressure about the will. She sent me articles about estate planning, emphasizing how parents should reward children who provide care and support, rather than treating all children equally, regardless of their involvement. She introduced me to an estate attorney who was apparently prepared to help me change my will to favor Nicole, though I declined to work with him. Nicole also started involving herself in my medical appointments, claiming she needed to be there because of my memory issues. She'd interrupt me when I spoke to doctors, would characterize normal forgetfulness as signs of dementia, and would ask doctors about my competence to make decisions. She was apparently building a case that I was declining mentally, perhaps to eventually seek guardianship or to claim any will leaving equal inheritance to Paul was the product of diminished capacity. Paul flew in from California when I told him what was happening. He was shocked by Nicole's behavior and the alienation of the children. He tried to talk to Nicole, who claimed I'd turned him against her and accused him of being after her money. Nicole's framing that the estate was somehow hers was revealing. She'd already decided she deserved everything and viewed Paul's equal share as theft from her. 1 year into this nightmare, I filed for court-ordered grandparent visitation and hired an attorney to send Nicole a cease and desist letter about her interference with my medical appointments and her defamatory statements. The legal route is expensive and emotionally draining, but I refuse to lose my grandchildren based on Nicole's lies. The court case for visitation is proceeding slowly. My attorney has gathered evidence of Nicole's alienation campaign, text messages where she made false claims about me, testimony from friends about the sudden cutoff of access, and reports from school staff who confirmed I'd always been an involved, appropriate grandparent before Nicole stopped bringing the children around. Nicole's attorney is claiming I'm harassing the family, and that the children independently chose not to see me because of my behavior. But Emma is only 12, Lucas is 9, and Sophie is 6. They're not independently making decisions about cutting off their grandmother. Nicole orchestrated this estrangement and coached them on what to say. I've also revised my will to include a no-contest clause, stating that anyone who challenges the equal distribution will forfeit their entire inheritance. If Nicole tries to claim after my death that Paul manipulated me or that I was incompetent, she'll lose everything. My attorney has documented my current competence extensively, so there's clear evidence I'm making decisions with full capacity. Paul has become my primary support system. He calls daily and has considered moving back to our state to be more involved. We've discussed him potentially filing for custody of the children if evidence emerges that Nicole is harming them through the alienation. Parental alienation is recognized as a form of psychological abuse, and there's case law supporting custody modification in severe cases. The financial dimension has become clearer through discovery in the court case. Nicole is deeply in debt, approximately $180,000 in credit cards, car loans, and personal loans. She's facing potential foreclosure on her house. She views my $850,000 estate as the solution to her financial problems and is furious that she'll have to split it with Paul instead of receiving everything. Nicole's financial desperation explains the timing and intensity of the alienation campaign. She needs money urgently and apparently decided that destroying my relationship with my grandchildren was acceptable collateral damage if it might pressure me into changing my will. She's weaponizing her own children to manipulate me financially, which is unconscionable. I'm sharing this story to warn other grandparents. If adult children suddenly restrict access to grandchildren, and you notice patterns of being undermined or falsely portrayed, you may be experiencing grandparent alienation. Document everything. Maintain relationships with other family members who can testify to the truth, and consult with both therapists and attorneys who understand these dynamics. Nicole chose to destroy her children's relationship with their grandmother rather than accept equal inheritance with her brother. She's taught Emma, Lucas, and Sophie that their grandmother is dangerous and racist, lies that will damage these children even if I eventually restore contact. The psychological harm Nicole has inflicted on her own children to manipulate me financially is child abuse, and I'll fight through the courts to protect my grandchildren from their mother's toxic manipulation. My ex-wife poisoned my kids against me with lies about abuse that never happened. The soul-destroying parental alienation I've endured for 2 years has shown me that my ex-wife Linda systematically told our 3 children that I physically and emotionally abused them during our marriage, creating false memories and coaching them to fear me, all to justify taking full custody and eliminating my visitation rights so she could move across the country with her new boyfriend. I'm Robert, 51 years old, and Linda and I divorced 3 years ago after 18 years of marriage. We have 3 kids, Emma, 15, Jake, 12, and Sophie, 9. The divorce was contentious, but we'd agreed to joint custody with the kids splitting time between households. I'd been a devoted father who coached their sports teams, attended every school event, and had close relationships with all 3 kids. About 2 years ago, Linda started a relationship with a man named Kevin, who lives in Arizona. We're in Ohio. Linda began talking about moving there for Kevin's job opportunities and better weather. I told her absolutely not. She couldn't take our kids across the country away from me. Our custody agreement required both parents' consent for relocation, which I refused. That's when Linda started her campaign of lies. She began telling the kids that I'd been mean to them when they were younger, that they just didn't remember because they'd blocked out the trauma. She showed them photos from our marriage and reframed normal family moments. Me playfully wrestling with Jake became Dad being aggressive. Me raising my voice during an argument with Linda became Dad screaming at all of us. The kids started acting different during my custody time, distant, uncomfortable, watching me nervously. When I asked what was wrong, Emma said Mom had told them about how I used to hurt them. I was stunned. I'd never laid a hand on my children or emotionally abused anyone. I'd been a loving, engaged father. Linda had coached them to describe vague, scary memories of me yelling, punishing them harshly, and making them afraid. None of it was real, but she'd been working on them for months, slowly building a false narrative. She took normal childhood memories, timeouts, raised voices during teenage conflicts, standard parenting, and recast them as abuse. She filed for modification of custody, claiming the children were afraid of me due to past abuse, and requesting supervised visitation only. She submitted declarations from all 3 kids, describing how scared they were of me and how safe they felt with Mom. The custody battle was a nightmare. Linda presented the kids' statements as evidence of abuse. Emma, Jake, and Sophie had all written letters describing fear of me and requesting they not have to see me anymore. Reading my own children's words claiming I'd hurt them, things that had never happened, was devastating beyond description. Linda also found a therapist who specialized in trauma recovery and had the kids start therapy. This therapist, who never spoke to me or sought my perspective, produced reports diagnosing the children with PTSD from parental abuse. The therapist claimed Emma, Jake, and Sophie were exhibiting classic signs of abuse trauma, including fear of the abusive parent and protective attachment to the safe parent. My attorney hired our own child psychologist who specialized in parental alienation. Dr. Martinez evaluated the situation and concluded that Linda had engaged in systematic alienation, deliberately creating false memories, coaching statements, and manipulating the children to fear me in order to support her custody goals. Dr. Martinez's report detailed specific techniques Linda had used, including repeated suggestion, emotional manipulation, and rewarding the children for expressing fear of me. The court-appointed custody evaluator was initially skeptical of my abuse denials. False allegations are unfortunately common in contentious divorces. But after interviewing teachers, coaches, neighbors, and family friends, a pattern emerged. No one had ever observed anything remotely abusive in my interactions with my children. Multiple witnesses described me as patient, affectionate, and appropriately engaged. The custody evaluator also identified concerning patterns in Linda's behavior. She was constantly present during the kids' therapy sessions, rather than allowing them private time with the therapist. She immediately moved to Arizona with Kevin the moment she filed for custody modification, despite that move being prohibited under our agreement. And her own statements contradicted earlier testimony, where she'd acknowledged I was a good father. Most damning were text messages the forensic investigator recovered from Linda's phone to Kevin. Messages like, "Getting the kids on board with the move. They're starting to say they're scared of Rob like I told them." And, "Emma finally told the therapist what I've been coaching her to say about the abuse." Linda had documented her own fraud. The judge was furious. In his ruling, he found that Linda had engaged in parental alienation through fabricated abuse allegations, had manipulated the children's perceptions of their father, and had attempted to use false abuse claims to justify violating custody agreements. He maintained our joint custody arrangement, prohibited Linda from moving with the kids to Arizona, and ordered reunification therapy to repair the damage Linda had caused. 18 months after the court ruling, I'm still fighting to repair my relationships with my children. Emma, now 17, refuses to see me at all, despite court orders. She's been so thoroughly convinced by Linda's lies that she believes I'm a dangerous abuser and her mother is protecting her. The court can't force a 17-year-old to have visitation, so I've essentially lost my oldest daughter. Jake, 14, reluctantly comes to court-ordered visits but sits in silence, clearly believing he's being forced to spend time with someone who hurt him. The reunification therapist says it takes years to undo parental alienation, and sometimes relationships never fully recover. Jake has been programmed to fear me, and deprogramming requires him to accept that his mother lied to him, which he's not ready to do. Sophie, 11, is youngest and showing the most progress. She's starting to remember actual events rather than the false narrative Linda created. She recently said, "I don't think you were actually mean. I think Mom told me you were." That moment of clarity was heartbreaking and hopeful simultaneously. Heartbreaking that my daughter had been manipulated so thoroughly, hopeful that truth might eventually win. Linda faces no real consequences despite committing fraud. The judge verbally reprimanded her and denied her relocation request, but she wasn't held in contempt or punished for perjury. She continues living in Arizona where she moved illegally, the kids spending extended school breaks with her because the court can't force her to move back to Ohio. She violated custody orders and suffered minimal consequences. I've spent over $150,000 in legal fees fighting Linda's false allegations and trying to restore my relationships with my kids. The financial devastation is significant, but the emotional toll is incalculable. I've lost years of relationship with my children and may never fully recover Emma's trust. Jake may enter adulthood believing lies about his father. The injustice is that Linda achieved partially what she wanted. She's living in Arizona with Kevin. The kids spend summers and holidays there, and even though the court found she lied, she faces no criminal prosecution for perjury or for coaching the kids to make false statements. The family court system is set up to protect children from abuse, but has inadequate tools to protect parents from false allegations. I'm sharing this story so other fathers facing similar situations know they're not alone. False abuse allegations in custody battles are a real phenomenon. Parental alienation is psychological abuse of children, using them as weapons in adult conflicts. If you're facing this, document everything, hire experts who understand alienation, and fight for your relationship with your kids, even when it feels hopeless. My relationship with Emma may be permanently damaged, but I won't give up on Jake and Sophie. I'll keep showing up for court-ordered visits, keep being patient with their confusion and fear, and keep hoping that eventually truth will triumph over the lies their mother told them. They deserve to know their father, and I deserve to be part of their lives despite Linda's efforts to erase me through fabricated abuse claims. My husband emptied our joint accounts after I was diagnosed with cancer. The devastating financial betrayal I discovered while recovering from my first chemotherapy session has shown me that my husband of 19 years withdrew $127,000 from our joint savings and checking accounts the same week I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. leaving me with no access to funds for treatment, while he apparently used the money to set up a separate life with his girlfriend. I'm Catherine, 49 years old, and I found a lump in my breast 3 months ago. The diagnosis came fast: aggressive cancer requiring immediate surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation. I was terrified, but assumed my husband Derek would be supportive. We'd been married since we were 30, had built a comfortable life with his income as an engineer and mine as a teacher, and had accumulated substantial savings. The week after my diagnosis, while I was consumed with meeting oncologists and scheduling surgery, Derek withdrew everything from our joint accounts: $89,000 from savings and $38,000 from checking. I discovered it when my debit card was declined at the pharmacy trying to fill prescriptions. I checked our accounts online and found them at zero balance. I called Derek in panic. He claimed there was some kind of banking error, and he'd look into it. But when I checked transaction history, I saw clear transfers from our accounts to an account I didn't recognize. When I confronted him with this, Derek admitted he'd moved the money but claimed it was for safety, given my medical situation. That made no sense. Why would my cancer diagnosis require moving all our money to accounts I couldn't access? Derek became defensive and angry when I pressed him. He said I was too emotional to handle finances right now, and he was protecting our assets. He refused to transfer the money back. 2 days later, my best friend sent me screenshots from social media. Derek's coworker had posted vacation photos from Hawaii, photos that included Derek and a woman I'd never seen. They were clearly a couple in the photos, holding hands and kissing. Derek was supposedly at a work conference that week. I hired a divorce attorney and a forensic accountant. We discovered Derek had opened accounts in his name only and had transferred our entire life savings. He'd also opened a credit card in just his name and had been spending thousands on his girlfriend, the Hawaii trip, jewelry, expensive dinners. The forensic investigation revealed Derek's betrayal had been planned for months before my cancer diagnosis. He'd been having an affair with his coworker Melissa, 34, for over a year. They'd been discussing him leaving me and starting a life together. My cancer diagnosis had apparently accelerated his timeline. He'd decided to take the money and leave rather than be trapped supporting a sick wife. Bank records showed Derek had been systematically preparing for months. He'd changed his direct deposit to the new solo account 3 months before my diagnosis. He'd been siphoning money from our joint checking into his personal account in small amounts that I hadn't noticed. The $127,000 he took from our joint accounts was just the final, obvious theft after months of quiet embezzlement. Text messages between Derek and Melissa were even more damning. After my diagnosis, Melissa had texted, "Are you really going to stay with her now?" Derek's response, "I'm working on the exit strategy. Need to secure the finances first." Another message from Derek, "Can't believe I'm going to be stuck with medical bills. Need to protect what we've saved." He'd viewed my cancer as a financial liability. Rather than supporting his wife through a life-threatening illness, Derek had calculated how to abandon me while taking all our money so he wouldn't be financially responsible for my treatment. The cruelty was incomprehensible. My attorney filed emergency motions to freeze Derek's accounts and to require return of marital funds. But legal processes are slow. Meanwhile, I had surgery scheduled and chemotherapy starting, with no money to pay for treatment beyond what insurance covered. The copays, deductibles, medications, and transportation costs I couldn't afford were piling up. I'd had to move in with my sister because I couldn't pay my rent after Derek emptied our accounts. My sister was supporting me financially through treatment, while my attorney fought to recover my own money. The humiliation of being 49 years old, going through cancer treatment, and dependent on my sister's charity because my husband stole our savings was crushing. Derek's family claimed they'd had no idea what he was planning. His mother actually called to say she was praying for me, but in the same conversation defended Derek by saying, "Marriage is complicated and we don't know what goes on between two people." The victim blaming from his own mother was stunning. My adult children, our son 22 and daughter 19, were devastated and disgusted. Both cut off contact with Derek and told him they wanted nothing to do with a father who'd abandoned their mother during cancer treatment. Derek's response was to claim I'd turned the kids against him and that he was the real victim of my manipulation. 4 months into this nightmare, I'm halfway through chemotherapy and fighting Derek in court for the marital assets he stole. The legal battle has been expensive. I've spent $18,000 in attorney fees that my sister loaned me. Derek is fighting every motion, claiming the money was his because he earned more during our marriage, ignoring that marital assets are joint property regardless of who earned them. The forensic accountant's report shows Derek spent $43,000 of our stolen money on his girlfriend in 3 months. The Hawaii trip, a diamond bracelet, rent for an apartment they're sharing, and furniture. He liquidated retirement funds we'd spent 19 years building to fund a lifestyle with his mistress while I was losing my hair to chemotherapy. My oncologist wrote a letter to the court describing how financial stress was impacting my treatment and recovery. Studies show financial toxicity, the stress of medical costs, worsens cancer outcomes. Derek's theft wasn't just betrayal. It was literally endangering my health while I fought for my life. The court finally ordered Derek to return $85,000 to a joint account pending final divorce settlement. He's appealed, claiming he needs the money for living expenses. His attorney argued that Derek shouldn't be forced to impoverish himself to fund my medical care. The legal argument that supporting your spouse's cancer treatment equals impoverishment was obscene. I've received tremendous support from friends and even acquaintances who heard about the situation. A former teaching colleague organized a fundraiser that raised $12,000 for my medical expenses. Parents of students I'd taught years ago sent cards with money. My church provided meal trains and transportation to appointments. The community support has been the opposite of Derek's cruelty. Derek and Melissa are apparently still together, and she's been posting social media content about their relationship. She refers to Derek as her soulmate and posts photos of them at restaurants and events. She seems completely unbothered by the fact that their relationship began while he was married and that he abandoned his sick wife to be with her. The divorce will be finalized in approximately 6 months. My attorney is confident I'll receive the majority of marital assets given Derek's egregious conduct. But even winning the divorce won't undo the trauma of facing cancer while my husband of 19 years stole our savings and abandoned me for his younger girlfriend. I'm cancer-free as of last month. My oncologist says treatment was successful, and scans show no evidence of disease. I survived both cancer and Derek's betrayal, though some days I'm not sure which was harder to endure. Derek chose the worst moment of my life to show me exactly who he was. And I'll never forget that people are capable of profound cruelty, even toward those they claimed to love. My husband's secret second family was living in the house I thought was his office. The absolutely earth-shattering discovery I made last month has destroyed my entire sense of reality. My husband of 22 years has been maintaining a complete second family for the past 13 years, and the commercial office space he claimed to rent for his consulting business is actually a house where he lives part-time with his other wife and their 3 children. I'm Karen, 50 years old, and I thought I had a solid marriage with my husband David, 52. We have 2 kids, Brian, 21, and Ashley, 18. David has run his own business consulting firm for 15 years, and he's always traveled extensively for work and spent several nights weekly at what he told me was his downtown office, where he'd work late on projects and crash rather than commuting home. I never questioned his absences because his business was successful and supported our comfortable lifestyle. David was attentive when home, involved with our kids, and we'd had what I believed was a happy marriage. He'd even taken me past his office building a few times when we'd had dinner downtown, pointing to a professional-looking building and saying his suite was on the 3rd floor. Last month, I was having lunch with a friend in a neighborhood about 40 minutes from our home, an area I rarely visited. We were leaving the restaurant when I saw David's distinctive car with the custom license plate parked in the driveway of a residential home. I was confused about why his car was there during the afternoon on a Tuesday, when he'd told me that morning he had client meetings all day. I drove past slowly and saw through the window a woman setting a table while children, who looked about 8, 11, and 13, were visible in the background. As I watched, David walked into view wearing casual clothes and kissed the woman before sitting down at the table with the family. I sat in my car, shaking, watching my husband have a normal family dinner with people I'd never seen before. I hired a private investigator that same day. Within a week, I had documentation of David's entire double life. The woman was named Susan, 41, and she believed she was married to David. They'd had a ceremony 13 years ago, though obviously not legally since he was already married to me. Their children were 13, 11, and 8. The PI's report was comprehensive and devastating. David had been living 2 complete lives for 13 years. He'd split his time between households, 3 to 4 days weekly with me and our kids, 3 to 4 days weekly with Susan and their kids. He'd told Susan the same thing he'd told me, that his consulting business required extensive travel and irregular hours, which explained his frequent absences from her household. David had 2 phones, 2 sets of clothes, 2 complete lives. With me, he was the devoted husband and father who'd raised Brian and Ashley. With Susan, he was equally devoted to their 3 younger children. He attended parent-teacher conferences at 2 different schools. He celebrated holidays and birthdays in duplicate. He'd even taken Susan and her kids on business trip vacations during times he'd told me he was traveling alone for work. The financial investigation showed how he'd funded this double life. His consulting business was legitimate and generated substantial income, approximately $400,000 annually. But instead of that income supporting one family comfortably, it was stretched supporting 2 households. David had been living more frugally than necessary with me while also funding Susan's household and their children's expenses. He'd rented the house Susan lived in rather than buying, so there was no property record in his name. He paid cash for most expenses with Susan to avoid paper trails. The office space rent I'd seen on our business accounts was actually half going to his actual small office and half going to Susan's rent. He'd been hiding a second family in plain sight on our financial records by disguising their expenses as business costs. I confronted David by showing up at Susan's house while he was there. The look on his face when he opened the door and saw me was pure terror. Susan came to the door asking who I was, and I told her I was David's wife of 22 years and mother of his 2 adult children. Susan's face went white as she processed that the man she'd been married to for 13 years was actually legally married to someone else. The conversation that followed was surreal. Both Susan and I demanded answers while David sat at their kitchen table looking defeated. He claimed he'd fallen in love with Susan while still loving me and couldn't choose between his families. He'd convinced himself he could maintain both relationships indefinitely. He'd actually said he thought he could keep both families happy while living a double life forever. 2 months after discovering David's secret second family, both households are in ruins. I filed for divorce immediately, seeking the maximum possible settlement given David's egregious deception and his misuse of marital assets to fund his other family. Susan is facing the reality that her 13-year marriage was never legal, and David has no financial obligations to her beyond child support for their 3 kids. David's 2 families have both rejected him. Brian and Ashley are devastated and disgusted. They have 3 half-siblings they never knew existed, siblings who are 13, 11, and 8 years old. David created and abandoned children rather than either committing to his legal family or divorcing me to be with Susan. He chose to live a lie that's now destroyed his relationships with all 5 of his children. Susan initially tried to maintain her relationship with David, apparently still believing they could have a future together now that I was divorcing him. But she quickly realized David had deceived her as completely as he'd deceived me. He'd told her he was single when they met, had staged a fake wedding ceremony that had no legal validity, and had lied about literally everything for 13 years. She's now pursuing child support and considering fraud charges. The financial settlement in my divorce is complicated by figuring out how much marital assets David diverted to Susan's household. My forensic accountant estimates David spent approximately $580,000 of marital funds on Susan and their children over 13 years. Money that should have been joint marital assets, but that he spent on his secret family. I'm seeking credit for half of that amount, plus compensation for deception. David's business is struggling because his reputation is destroyed. Word spread quickly in our community about his double life. Clients don't want to work with someone who's proven capable of 13 years of systematic deception. David claims he's being unfairly punished in business for personal failings, but clients say they can't trust someone who maintains such elaborate lies for so long. My adult children are in therapy processing the betrayal and the existence of half-siblings they never knew about. Brian had been planning to ask David to be his best man in his upcoming wedding, but now wants no contact with his father. Ashley, who was Daddy's little girl, feels like her entire childhood was a lie. Every business trip was actually time with his other family. Every absence was a choice to be with the other kids instead of her. Susan's children are apparently struggling even more. They're younger and don't fully understand why the father who lived with them part-time was actually married to someone else the whole time. Susan told me during one phone call, we've communicated a few times trying to piece together David's deception, that her 13-year-old keeps asking if David is really his father or if that was a lie too. I'm 50 years old, discovering that 22 years of my marriage were built on comprehensive deception. David maintained 2 families for 13 years, deceiving all of us. The man I trusted most systematically lied about everything while living a double life. I'm sharing this story as a warning. If your spouse has unusual or hard-to-verify schedules, if they spend many nights away, if their explanations don't quite add up, trust your instincts and verify. David had successfully compartmentalized 2 complete lives, and only random chance led to me discovering the truth when I saw his car by accident. My sister-in-law secretly recorded my private therapy sessions to use against me in court. The absolutely shocking violation of my privacy I discovered 4 weeks ago has exposed that my brother's wife, Angela, planted recording devices in my home therapist's office and captured 6 months of my confidential therapy sessions, then submitted edited recordings to family court, claiming I was mentally unstable and unfit to have custody of my own children. I'm Michelle, 46 years old, going through a contentious divorce from my husband Greg after 20 years of marriage. We have 2 children, Noah, 14, and Lily, 11. The divorce involves disputes over custody and division of assets, including a business Greg and I built together. Greg's brother Mark is married to Angela, and they've been heavily involved in supporting Greg throughout the divorce. I've been seeing a therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen, for 18 months to help me process the divorce and manage the stress. Dr. Chen runs her practice from a renovated home office, and our sessions have been crucial for my mental health. I've been completely honest in therapy about my struggles, my anger at Greg's affair that triggered the divorce, my fears about single parenting, and my occasional dark thoughts during particularly difficult days. Last month, Greg's attorney submitted a motion seeking to modify our temporary custody arrangement to give Greg primary custody instead of our current 50-50 split. The motion claimed I was mentally and emotionally unstable and posed a risk to the children's well-being. Attached were audio recordings of what were clearly my therapy sessions with Dr. Chen. I was horrified listening to clips of my own voice discussing my worst moments in therapy, crying about feeling like a failure, expressing anger toward Greg, admitting there were days I struggled to get out of bed. These deeply private moments had been recorded without my knowledge or consent, edited to remove context, and were being used to paint me as dangerously unstable. Dr. Chen was equally horrified. She'd had no idea her office was bugged. We called the police, who found 3 sophisticated recording devices, one in the waiting room, one in her therapy office, and one in the hallway. The devices were wireless and had been transmitting recordings remotely for approximately 6 months. The investigation traced the devices to Angela. She'd apparently researched spy equipment, purchased bugs online, and had planted them in Dr. Chen's office by posing as a potential client who'd asked for a tour of the space to see if the environment felt safe before booking. The police arrested Angela for illegal wiretapping, which is a felony in our state. Recording someone without consent in an area where they have expectation of privacy, like a therapist's office, carries serious criminal penalties. Angela was also charged with identity theft for posing as a therapy client to gain access to Dr. Chen's office. The investigation revealed the extent of Angela's scheme. She'd been monitoring the recordings in real time, listening to my therapy sessions as they happened. She'd compiled a file of clips where I expressed anger, frustration, or dark thoughts, carefully editing out any context or Dr. Chen's therapeutic responses. She'd created a highlight reel of my worst moments over 6 months, designed to make me look unstable. She'd then given these recordings to Greg's attorney, who'd submitted them to court. Greg claimed he hadn't known how Angela obtained the recordings, but text messages showed otherwise. Messages between Greg and Angela discussed getting evidence of Michelle's mental state, and Angela assuring Greg she had a plan to document her therapy sessions. My attorney filed emergency motions to exclude the illegally obtained recordings from evidence, to sanction Greg's attorney for submitting them, and to hold Greg in contempt for coordinating illegal surveillance. We also filed a police report that led to Angela's arrest. Dr. Chen filed complaints with her professional licensing board about the breach of her office security and the violation of therapist-client confidentiality. She's considering a lawsuit against Angela for the violation of her practice and her client's privacy. Dr. Chen had 5 other clients whose sessions were also recorded during the period Angela's devices were active. The family court judge was appalled when presented with evidence of how the recordings were obtained. He immediately excluded them from evidence, sanctioned Greg's attorney $10,000 for submitting illegally obtained materials, and issued a strongly worded ruling that using illegal surveillance to violate confidential therapy to gain advantage in custody proceedings represents egregious misconduct that strikes at the heart of family court principles. The judge also modified custody, but in my favor, not Greg's. He gave me primary custody, with Greg receiving supervised visitation only, citing Greg's coordination of illegal surveillance as evidence of poor judgment and lack of respect for the children's mother. The judge said parents who'd engage in illegal wiretapping of therapy couldn't be trusted with unsupervised access to children. Greg's response was to claim he was a victim too, that Angela had acted independently without his knowledge, despite text messages proving otherwise. He tried to throw his own sister-in-law under the bus to save himself, claiming she was overzealous in trying to help. 1 month after discovering Angela's illegal recordings of my therapy, she's facing serious criminal charges, while Greg has lost custody pending the outcome of the criminal case. But the psychological damage to me is severe. Every private thought I shared in therapy, my most vulnerable moments, was recorded and weaponized against me. The betrayal isn't just from Angela and Greg, but from having the sanctity of therapy violated. I've had to find a new therapist, because I can't continue with Dr. Chen. Not because of anything she did wrong, but because that space has been contaminated by Angela's surveillance. Every time I sat in that office after discovering the recordings, I felt violated and exposed. Dr. Chen understood and provided referrals, but starting over with a new therapist means rebuilding trust and rapport. The criminal case against Angela is proceeding. She faces up to 5 years in prison for illegal wiretapping. Her attorney is trying to negotiate a plea deal, but prosecutors are insisting on jail time, given the particularly egregious nature of bugging a therapist's office. Angela violated not just my privacy, but the privacy of 5 other therapy clients whose sessions were also recorded. Greg's attorney has been reported to the state bar for submitting illegally obtained evidence. The Bar Association is investigating whether he violated ethical rules. Greg's attorney claims he didn't know the recordings were obtained illegally, but the bar investigator says attorneys have an obligation to question how evidence was obtained before submitting it to court. My relationship with Greg's entire family is destroyed. Mark, Angela's husband and Greg's brother, initially defended Angela, but has since distanced himself after the criminal charges. He's apparently considering divorce himself. Discovering your wife is capable of coordinating illegal surveillance and risking felony charges has made him question whether he knows her at all. The divorce proceedings have been delayed while the criminal case unfolds. My attorney says Angela's conviction will strengthen our position significantly. A spouse who coordinates felony surveillance to sabotage the other parent's custody rights demonstrates unfitness for shared parenting decisions. Greg may end up with minimal custody, or even just supervised visitation permanently. I'm sharing this story as a warning. If you're in therapy during contentious legal proceedings, take security seriously. Sweep your therapist's office for bugs if you're concerned. Use a therapist whose office has professional security measures. And understand that people facing high-stakes custody or financial disputes may resort to illegal surveillance if they think they can get away with it. What Angela did to me, violating my therapy and exposing my most private thoughts, is a form of psychological warfare I wouldn't wish on anyone. But she and Greg will face consequences, while I'll eventually heal, with new therapy in a secure environment. They gambled that illegal surveillance would win custody, but instead, they lost custody and face criminal prosecution for trying to weaponize my mental health treatment against me. My son convinced me to co-sign his business loan, then defaulted, leaving me bankrupt. The financial catastrophe I'm living through started when my son Tyler convinced me to co-sign a $125,000 business loan for his restaurant venture, promising he'd built a solid business plan and would never let me down. Then he stopped making payments after 6 months and disappeared, leaving me facing bankruptcy at age 48 with my retirement destroyed. I'm Jennifer, and Tyler is 26. He'd always been entrepreneurial and came to me last year with what seemed like a legitimate restaurant concept. He had a business plan, potential investors, and claimed he just needed me to co-sign the loan to secure better terms. As a single mother who'd raised him alone while working as a hospital administrator, I wanted to support his dreams. I co-signed the $125,000 loan. Tyler opened his restaurant but was apparently in over his head from day one. The business struggled immediately. Poor location choice, mismanaged finances, expensive lease. Tyler made 6 months of loan payments, then the money dried up and payments stopped. The bank started calling me. Tyler had stopped responding to them entirely. When I tried to reach him, he'd make excuses about temporary cash flow problems and promised to resume payments soon. Then he stopped answering my calls altogether. I drove to his apartment and found it empty. He'd moved without telling me. I discovered through mutual friends that Tyler had left the state, essentially abandoning the failed restaurant and the loan obligation. The bank made it clear I was fully liable as co-signer. They wanted $125,000 plus accumulating interest and penalties. I didn't have it. My savings were about $45,000 and my income was $68,000 annually. The bank is now pursuing legal action. I've had to hire a bankruptcy attorney because there's no way I can pay this debt. My credit score has plummeted from 710 to 520. I'm facing Chapter 7 bankruptcy that will destroy the financial security I'd spent 25 years building. Tyler occasionally texts vague apologies, but refuses to discuss the loan or take any responsibility. He says he had to start over somewhere new, and I'm making it about myself. My son destroyed my financial life and abandoned me to deal with the consequences alone. My retirement accounts are being drained to pay legal fees. The $85,000 I had saved in my 401k is being consumed by bankruptcy proceedings and attempts to negotiate with the bank. I'm 48 years old and starting over financially because I trusted my son and wanted to help him succeed. The bankruptcy trustee is liquidating my assets. I'm losing my car, a paid-off Honda I'd owned for 6 years, because it has equity that can be applied to the debt. I'm selling furniture and belongings to generate cash. The comfortable middle-class life I'd built through decades of hard work is being dismantled, piece by piece. My employment is also at risk. My hospital requires certain financial standards for administrative positions, and bankruptcy triggers a review. I might lose my $68,000 job because of financial instability, even though the instability was caused by my son's fraud and abandonment. The HR department says they're evaluating the situation. Friends and family have been sympathetic, but there's an undertone of judgment. I should have known better than to co-sign such a large loan. People say I enabled Tyler's irresponsibility, but he's my son, and I believed in him. I thought I was helping him build a future, not funding my own financial destruction. I've hired a private investigator to locate Tyler because the bankruptcy court wants him questioned. The investigator found him living in Colorado under his girlfriend's lease, working cash jobs to avoid garnishment. He has no assets and no intention of helping resolve the debt he created. My attorney says I have potential civil claims against Tyler for fraud and breach of promise, but pursuing them would cost more legal fees I don't have. Even if I won judgment, Tyler has nothing to collect from. I could spend years and more money trying to hold him accountable while he continues living consequence-free. The emotional toll is devastating beyond the financial loss. Tyler was my only child. I raised him alone after his father left when he was 3. I worked 2 jobs to afford his sports and activities. I paid for his college. I sacrificed everything to give him opportunities. And he repaid me by destroying my financial security and abandoning me. He calls occasionally from new numbers, always with excuses and justifications. He claims the restaurant failure wasn't his fault. The location was bad. His investors pulled out. The pandemic affected business. He never acknowledges that regardless of why the business failed, he had a responsibility to me as his co-signer. He just disappeared and left me holding a 6-figure debt I can't pay. The bankruptcy is proceeding and will be finalized next month. I'll emerge with destroyed credit, depleted retirement savings, and years of rebuilding ahead. I'm 48, which means I have maybe 17 years until retirement age to recover what Tyler destroyed in 6 months of business failure and abandonment. I've accepted I'll likely never retire. The retirement savings I'd built over 25 years are gone. Even working until 67 or 70, I won't accumulate enough to retire securely. Tyler's betrayal didn't just cost me money now. It cost me the ability to ever stop working. My relationship with Tyler is destroyed, obviously. I've told him through his girlfriend that I want no contact. He sent a long email saying he's sorry things turned out this way, but that I need to take responsibility for my own financial decisions. The victim blaming from the person who victimized me is obscene. Some relatives defend Tyler, saying he's young and made mistakes. But this wasn't a mistake. It was sustained fraud. He knew the business was failing. He stopped making payments without telling me. He moved states to avoid accountability. He left me facing bankruptcy while refusing to help or even acknowledge his responsibility. I'm telling my story as a warning. Never co-sign loans for anyone, even your children. No matter how much you trust them or want to help, don't risk your financial security. If Tyler's business had succeeded, he'd have gotten all the benefit. When it failed, I got all the consequences. That's not partnership, that's exploitation. I'll survive this bankruptcy and rebuild, but I'll never trust the same way again. My son taught me that family loyalty is one-directional sometimes. I'd sacrifice anything for him, but he'll sacrifice me without hesitation when it serves his interests. That's a lesson I paid $125,000 to learn. My son-in-law convinced my daughter I have dementia to take control of my finances. The terrifying manipulation I escaped 2 months ago has shown me that my son-in-law Brad systematically convinced my daughter Jennifer that I was developing dementia so they could gain power of attorney, access my retirement accounts, and drain approximately $240,000 of my savings while I was actually cognitively fine, but being gaslit into doubting my own mental capacity. I'm Richard, 58, and Jennifer is my only child at 32. She married Brad 5 years ago, and they have 2 young children. I've always gotten along reasonably well with Brad, though I found him somewhat financially irresponsible. Expensive cars, constant home renovations, and a lifestyle that seemed beyond their income. Still, I kept my opinions to myself and maintained a cordial relationship. About a year ago, Brad started making comments during family dinners about me seeming forgetful or confused. He'd claim I'd told him something I was certain I'd never said, or insist I'd forgotten conversations that I had no memory of. Jennifer would look concerned and ask if I was feeling all right. I'd insist I was fine, but Brad's comments planted seeds of doubt. Over months, Brad escalated these claims. He told Jennifer I'd called him at 3 a.m. asking where I was. I never did. He claimed I'd gotten lost driving home from their house. I hadn't. He said I'd left my stove on multiple times. Completely false. Each incident was a complete fabrication, but Brad told them to Jennifer with such conviction that she started believing I was declining mentally. Jennifer eventually sat me down with Brad present and said she was worried about my cognitive health. She wanted me to see a neurologist for evaluation and to consider giving her power of attorney, just in case I needed help managing affairs. I was insulted and confused. I was 58, working full-time as an accountant, managing my life perfectly well. But Jennifer seemed genuinely frightened for me, and I didn't want to dismiss her concerns if there was actually something wrong. I agreed to see a neurologist who ran extensive testing and found nothing wrong. My cognitive function was completely normal for my age. But when I told Jennifer and Brad about the results, Brad claimed the doctor had told him privately that I was in early stages of decline that I wasn't aware of. This was a complete lie, but Jennifer believed her husband over the actual medical report I showed her. Pressured by Jennifer and Brad's combined insistence that I needed help for my own protection, I eventually signed power of attorney documents giving Jennifer authority to manage my finances if I became incapacitated. I thought this was just paperwork for emergencies, but I didn't read carefully enough. The power of attorney Brad had arranged gave Jennifer immediate authority, not just in case of my incapacity. Within weeks of signing, I started noticing strange transactions in my accounts. Large transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. Withdrawals of $10,000, $15,000, $8,000, happening regularly. When I questioned Jennifer, she claimed she was consolidating my accounts for better management, and I shouldn't worry about it because she was handling everything. I demanded details and access to see what was happening with my money. Jennifer became defensive, saying that my confusion about the account management proved I wasn't capable of handling finances anymore. She insisted that she and Brad were protecting me from making mistakes. When I insisted I was cognitively fine, Brad jumped in, claiming this was exactly what dementia patients say. They lack insight into their own decline. I felt like I was losing my mind. Was I actually confused? Was I forgetting things? Brad and Jennifer were so certain I was impaired that I started doubting my own perceptions. But something felt wrong about being blocked from accessing my own money and being told I couldn't be trusted with my own financial information. I secretly went to a different neurologist for a second opinion, one Jennifer and Brad didn't know about. This doctor also found no cognitive impairment whatsoever. When I explained the situation, the doctor actually said this sounded like I was being gaslit and possibly financially exploited, not like I had dementia. The doctor suggested I contact Adult Protective Services or an attorney. I hired an attorney who specialized in elder financial abuse. The attorney reviewed my power of attorney documents and was immediately concerned. The language gave Jennifer incredibly broad authority with minimal oversight. The attorney obtained my financial records and found that in just 6 months, Jennifer and Brad had transferred approximately $240,000 from my retirement accounts to accounts they controlled. The money had been spent on paying off Brad and Jennifer's mortgage, buying a new car, funding expensive home renovations, and taking luxury vacations. They'd essentially stolen my retirement savings while claiming they were managing my money for my protection. My attorney filed emergency motions to revoke the power of attorney and to freeze Jennifer's access to my accounts. We also filed for return of the stolen funds and reported Jennifer and Brad for financial elder abuse to authorities. 3 months after discovering Jennifer and Brad's scheme, I've regained control of my finances, but lost approximately $240,000 that may never be fully recovered. Brad and Jennifer are facing criminal charges for elder financial abuse and fraud. Jennifer claims she genuinely believed I was declining, and that Brad convinced her the spending was necessary for my care. But bank records show the money went to their personal expenses, not to anything benefiting me. The most painful aspect is Jennifer's continued insistence that she was trying to help, and that I'm making a mistake by pursuing legal action against my own daughter. She seems unable to grasp that she and Brad stole my retirement savings through fraud and gaslighting, regardless of what Brad told her about my supposed cognitive decline. Brad, who orchestrated this entire scheme, has shown no remorse. Text messages recovered by investigators show Brad explicitly planning how to make me appear incompetent so they could access my money. Messages to Jennifer like, "Just keep emphasizing he's confused and forgetful. Eventually he'll doubt himself enough to give us control." And, "Once we have POA, the retirement accounts are basically ours to manage." The criminal case is proceeding. Brad faces serious charges and potentially 5 to 8 years in prison. Jennifer faces lesser charges, with prosecutors acknowledging she may have been partially manipulated by Brad, though her willing participation in spending stolen funds undermines her claim of innocence. Their defense strategy seems to be claiming they genuinely believed they were managing my money appropriately, despite spending it on their mortgage and vacations. I've had to accept that my relationship with my daughter and grandchildren is likely permanently damaged. Jennifer is so committed to supporting Brad and maintaining her narrative that she was helping me that she can't acknowledge the theft and gaslighting. My grandchildren are being told I'm sick and wrongly accusing their parents, which breaks my heart. The financial recovery is uncertain. Jennifer and Brad spent most of the stolen money and have few remaining assets. Even if courts order restitution, I may recover only a fraction of the $240,000 they took. I'm 58 years old, forced to delay retirement and rebuild savings because my daughter and son-in-law decided my retirement fund was the solution to their financial problems. I'm sharing this story as a warning. Be extremely careful about granting power of attorney even to adult children. Read documents carefully and consider requiring oversight or co-signers. Be alert for patterns where family members claim you're declining mentally when you know you're fine. This can be gaslighting to manipulate you into giving up control. And get independent legal and medical advice if anyone pressures you about cognitive decline or financial management, because what's presented as help may actually be the setup for financial exploitation. Brad's scheme of convincing Jennifer I had dementia so they could access my money was sophisticated and nearly worked. If I hadn't sought independent medical evaluation and legal help, I'd still be blocked from my own accounts while they drained my remaining savings. The betrayal by Jennifer, who I raised alone after her mother left when she was young, is devastating. But I won't let them get away with stealing my retirement and gaslighting me into believing I was mentally incompetent when I was actually being systematically defrauded. My son-in-law convinced my daughter to put me in memory care so they could sell my house. The nightmare I barely escaped 3 months ago revealed that my son-in-law Brad orchestrated a scheme where he and my daughter Emily falsely claimed I had dementia to have me committed to a memory care facility, then immediately listed my house for sale to pocket the $425,000 proceeds while I was locked in an institution I didn't need. I'm Patricia, 58 years old, and I've lived in my house for 32 years. I'm a recently retired high school teacher with a good pension, fully mentally competent, and was managing my life independently. My daughter Emily, 32, married Brad 4 years ago, and they've always seemed financially stressed, despite both having decent jobs. 2 months ago, Emily started visiting more frequently, expressing concern about my memory problems. She'd ask if I'd forgotten appointments I'd never made, or claimed I'd repeated stories when I hadn't. I told her I was fine, but she insisted I see a doctor for cognitive testing, just to be safe. At her insistence, I went to a doctor, one Brad had recommended, not my regular physician. This doctor spent 30 minutes with me, asked some basic questions, then told Emily I should be evaluated for dementia. I was confused because I'd answered everything correctly, but the doctor said my lack of insight into my deficits was concerning. Within a week, Emily and Brad had me sign papers they claimed were for medical directives. I trusted my daughter and signed without reading carefully. Those documents were actually power of attorney and healthcare proxy, giving them control over my medical and financial decisions. Days later, 2 men showed up at my door saying they were taking me to a care assessment. Instead, they transported me to a locked memory care facility. When I protested that I didn't have dementia and didn't need to be there, staff treated my objections as confusion and lack of insight, common in dementia patients who don't recognize their impairment. I was trapped in a facility with actual dementia patients, denied my phone, told I couldn't leave for my safety. Meanwhile, Emily and Brad were using the power of attorney I'd unknowingly signed to access my bank accounts and list my house for sale. They'd planned to sell my house, pocket the money, and keep me institutionalized where I couldn't stop them. The memory care facility was psychological torture. I was fully cognitively intact, trapped with residents who had severe dementia and couldn't communicate coherently. Staff treated me like all the other patients, reminding me of my room number, trying to redirect me when I insisted I'd been brought there against my will, medicating me with drugs I didn't need. Every time I demanded to leave, staff said I lacked capacity to make that decision, and my daughter was my healthcare proxy. When I asked for my phone to call an attorney, I was told residents weren't allowed personal phones because they get confused and lost. I was literally imprisoned based on false dementia claims, with no way to advocate for myself. I'd been there 8 days when a social worker named Janet started her shift. Janet had worked in elder care for 20 years, and something about my case bothered her. I appeared cognitively sharp, expressed clear and consistent wishes to leave, and didn't exhibit dementia symptoms. She reviewed my file and saw the cognitive assessment was minimal, a 30-minute evaluation by a doctor I'd seen once. Janet requested an independent psychiatric evaluation. When the psychiatrist came, I explained the entire situation, how Brad had been pressuring Emily about needing my house's equity, how they'd manipulated me into signing documents, how I'd been essentially kidnapped. The psychiatrist conducted extensive testing and determined I had 0 cognitive impairment and was inappropriately placed. Janet also checked property records and found my house listed for sale at $425,000. Emily and Brad had put it on the market 3 days after having me committed. Their plan had been transparent: false dementia diagnosis, inappropriate institutionalization, quick house sale while I was locked away, unable to stop them. The psychiatrist's report got me released immediately. Janet helped me contact Adult Protective Services and the police. APS investigated and substantiated findings of false imprisonment and financial exploitation. Police opened a criminal investigation into fraud and elder abuse. I returned home to find Emily and Brad had already been showing the house to buyers. They'd had a locksmith change my locks and had removed some of my furniture. They'd been treating my house like it was already theirs, disposing of my possessions and preparing for sale. The confrontation was surreal. Emily actually tried to claim they'd thought this was best for me and were trying to help. But emails investigators found showed Brad explicitly discussing how to get control of her assets and referring to the memory care placement as getting her out of the way so we can sell. 3 months after escaping the memory care facility, Emily and Brad are facing multiple felony charges: fraud, false imprisonment, exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and conspiracy. The DA's office said this was one of the most egregious elder abuse cases they'd encountered because the victim wasn't actually vulnerable or impaired, but perpetrators had manufactured false incapacity to steal assets. The financial damage was significant, despite stopping the house sale. Emily and Brad had withdrawn $12,000 from my accounts before being stopped. They'd charged $3,500 to my credit cards for their own expenses. The memory care facility cost $8,000 for 8 days. Money taken from my accounts that I'm trying to recover through litigation. I've had to hire multiple attorneys, one for the criminal case, one for recovering stolen funds, one to sue the doctor who provided the fraudulent dementia diagnosis after a 30-minute evaluation. The legal fees are approaching $25,000, depleting my retirement savings. My daughter claims she was manipulated by Brad, that he convinced her I was really declining, and this was for my protection. But emails show Emily was an active participant, discussing the house sale proceeds and how they'd split the money. She's trying to avoid accountability by blaming Brad, but she made choices to betray her own mother. The memory care facility is also under investigation. They accepted a patient based on minimal evaluation, held me against my clearly expressed wishes, and didn't question obvious red flags like my consistent cognition and the immediate house listing by my concerned family members. Their quality oversight was clearly inadequate. My relationship with Emily is destroyed. How do you forgive your child for having you locked in a memory care facility and trying to steal your house? Emily sends messages claiming she made mistakes and wants to repair our relationship. But her mistakes were calculated fraud that could have left me institutionalized indefinitely while she and Brad stole my life savings. I've become an advocate for protecting elderly people from false capacity claims. I'm working with state legislators on bills requiring more rigorous evaluation before someone can be institutionalized, and protections against family members using power of attorney for financial exploitation. If this could happen to a 58-year-old retired teacher who was fully competent, it could happen to anyone. The criminal trial is scheduled for next year. Emily and Brad face potentially 8 to 12 years in prison. Part of me feels guilty that my own daughter might go to prison, but the larger part knows that people who'd lock their mother in a facility to steal her house deserve consequences. They gambled that I'd be trapped and powerless, but they underestimated one vigilant social worker who questioned an obviously inappropriate placement. My teen daughter faked pregnancy to extort money from me for her boyfriend's drug debts. The utterly devastating manipulation I uncovered 5 weeks ago revealed that my 17-year-old daughter, Kayla, faked an entire pregnancy, complete with positive tests, doctor visits, and ultrasound images, to extort $15,000 from me that she claimed was needed for medical expenses, but was actually to pay off her 23-year-old boyfriend's drug debts to dangerous dealers. I'm Scott, 48, and I've raised Kayla as a single father since her mother died from cancer when Kayla was 6. We'd always been close, or so I thought. Last year, Kayla started dating Tyler, a 23-year-old who never seemed to have steady employment and gave me bad vibes. I'd expressed concerns, but Kayla insisted I was being overprotective and controlling. 3 months ago, Kayla came to me crying, saying she was pregnant. She showed me positive pregnancy tests and said she was terrified. I was shocked. Kayla was only 17 and still in high school, but I told her I'd support her no matter what she decided. She said she wanted to keep the baby but needed money for prenatal care because she wasn't on my insurance plan for pregnancy-related expenses. Over the next 3 months, Kayla asked for money repeatedly. $2,000 for the first prenatal appointment, $3,500 for specialized testing, $4,000 for ultrasounds, $1,800 for vitamins and maternity clothes, $3,700 for setting up a nursery. I liquidated savings and even took out a personal loan to give her $15,000 total. She showed me ultrasound images and photos of a growing belly. I was devastated about becoming a grandfather at 48 to my teenage daughter's baby, but I was trying to be supportive. 2 weeks ago, Tyler's dealer showed up at my house looking for him and threatening violence over unpaid drug debts. He said Tyler owed $18,000 for cocaine and that your daughter knows all about it. I was confused about why Kayla would be involved with Tyler's drug debts. That night I confronted Kayla, asking what the dealer meant. She broke down and confessed everything. There was no pregnancy. The positive tests were purchased online. The doctor visits never happened. She'd been meeting Tyler instead. The ultrasound images were downloaded from the internet. The belly was a fake pregnancy prosthetic she bought online. She'd fabricated an entire pregnancy to extort money from me to help Tyler pay drug dealers. The betrayal was multi-layered and devastating. Kayla had spent months lying to my face about being pregnant. She'd watched me worry about her future, had accepted my emotional support about an incredibly difficult situation, and had let me believe I was helping my pregnant teenage daughter, when actually she was funneling money to her boyfriend's drug dealers. The $15,000 I'd given her went almost entirely to Tyler, who'd used it to partially pay down his cocaine debts. Kayla had received maybe $500 for herself, money she'd spent on clothes and going out with Tyler. She'd destroyed my savings and taken out a loan in my name to help her adult boyfriend pay for cocaine he couldn't afford. I immediately called the police. Both Kayla and Tyler were arrested. Kayla for fraud and extortion, Tyler for contributing to the delinquency of a minor and conspiracy to commit fraud. The detective said the fake pregnancy scheme was particularly egregious because Kayla had systematically manipulated parental concern to steal substantial money. Child Protective Services got involved because Kayla was a minor, involved with an adult who'd gotten her to commit felonies. CPS removed Kayla from my home and placed her in a group home pending investigation. They were evaluating whether I'd adequately supervised Kayla and whether she was safe to return home, given she'd been dating a drug-dealing 23-year-old. Kayla's attorney tried to argue she was a victim manipulated by Tyler. There was some truth to that. Tyler had clearly exploited her and gotten her involved in illegal activity. But Kayla had made choices. She'd researched how to fake pregnancy convincingly. She'd purchased fake tests and prosthetics. She'd created fake medical documents. She'd looked into my eyes and lied for months while taking money she knew was from my retirement savings. The school learned about the situation and Kayla was suspended pending expulsion hearings. Faking pregnancy and engaging in fraud brought negative attention to the school. Other parents didn't want their children around someone who'd commit that level of deception. Kayla went from being a decent student to facing expulsion and criminal charges. Tyler's dealer was also arrested for drug trafficking and making threats. Police found evidence Tyler had been selling cocaine, not just using. He'd accumulated debts by overextending himself trying to become a mid-level dealer. Kayla had been fully aware of Tyler's drug dealing and had even helped him occasionally, according to what investigators uncovered. My family was shocked when they learned the truth. My sister asked how I didn't notice Kayla wasn't actually pregnant. The fake belly and loose clothing had been convincing, and I'd had no reason to doubt my own daughter, who I'd trusted completely. The judgment from family about not detecting the deception was painful on top of the betrayal itself. 6 weeks after discovering Kayla's fake pregnancy fraud, she's facing juvenile charges that could result in detention until she turns 18. Tyler is facing adult felony charges, including fraud, corruption of a minor, and drug trafficking. My $15,000 is gone, spent paying Tyler's drug debts to dealers who've since been arrested or fled, making recovery impossible. I've had to accept that the daughter I raised is capable of looking me in the eye and lying systematically for months while stealing my retirement savings. Kayla's attorney wants her to write me an apology letter as part of plea negotiations, but I've told the prosecutor I don't want a manufactured apology written by lawyers. If Kayla ever genuinely wants to apologize, She knows where to find me. The CPS investigation concluded I'd done nothing wrong as a parent. Kayla's involvement with an adult drug dealer and her criminal choices weren't due to neglect or abuse. CPS acknowledged that sometimes teenagers make terrible decisions despite good parenting, particularly when influenced by manipulative adults. Kayla was cleared to return home, but I'm not sure I want her back. I've told Kayla's attorney that she can live with her aunt, my sister, when she's released from the group home. I need space from her, and I'm not ready to have her in my house after what she did. My sister has agreed to provide housing if the court approves, though she's ambivalent about taking on a teenager who's proven capable of elaborate fraud. Kayla sends me letters from the group home claiming she's sorry and was manipulated by Tyler. But investigators found evidence showing Kayla was an active participant who'd researched the fraud scheme and had even suggested using fake pregnancy because she knew it would get maximum money from me quickly. She wasn't just Tyler's puppet. She was an active conspirator. The financial impact has been severe. I'm 48, had $15,000 taken from retirement savings, and took out a personal loan I'm now repaying at high interest. The money that was supposed to fund my future was stolen by my own daughter to pay drug debts for her loser boyfriend. I'll be working years longer than planned to recover what Kayla destroyed in 3 months. Tyler is looking at serious prison time. Between the drug trafficking, the fraud scheme, and corruption of a minor, prosecutors are seeking 6 to 8 years. His attorney is trying to pin everything on Tyler to minimize Kayla's charges, claiming he manipulated an innocent teenager. But Kayla was far from innocent. She was a calculated co-conspirator who knew exactly what she was doing. I'm sharing this story as a warning. Pay attention to your teenagers' relationships, particularly with adults. Tyler was 23 pursuing a 17-year-old, which should have been a massive red flag. I was concerned, but didn't take strong enough action to end the relationship. By the time I discovered the truth, Kayla had already committed felonies helping Tyler and had stolen substantial money from me. The daughter I raised, who I thought I knew and trusted, is someone I don't recognize. She's facing criminal charges, possible expulsion, and destroyed our relationship over a drug dealer boyfriend and money. Whether we'll ever repair this relationship remains to be seen, but forgiveness, if it comes, will take years and will require Kayla taking genuine accountability, rather than claiming she was manipulated when evidence shows she was an active participant in defrauding her own father. My wife transferred our daughter's college fund to her mother without telling me. The absolutely infuriating financial betrayal I uncovered last week has shown me that my wife Amanda secretly withdrew all $118,000 from our daughter's college savings account and transferred it to her mother's personal account, apparently to help her mother avoid losing her house to foreclosure, leaving our daughter with nothing for college that starts in 3 months. I'm Jason, 47, and Amanda and I have been married for 20 years with our daughter Claire, who's 18 and graduates high school next month. We've been diligently saving for Claire's college education since she was born. Monthly contributions, birthday gift money from relatives, tax refund deposits, all going into a $529 college savings account. The account had grown to approximately $118,000, enough to cover 4 years of in-state tuition, plus room and board. Claire was accepted to her dream school, and we'd celebrated that the college fund would cover most of her expenses. She'd be starting in August with no student loans needed. Amanda and I had both been proud that our consistent saving meant Claire could focus on studies rather than worrying about debt. Last week I received a notice from the 529 account administrator about a large withdrawal. I was confused since we hadn't authorized any withdrawals. Claire hadn't started school yet. I logged into the account and found the entire $118,000 balance had been withdrawn 2 weeks ago. The transfer had gone to an external account I didn't recognize. I immediately confronted Amanda. She became defensive and evasive, saying she'd handled something and would explain later. I insisted on an explanation immediately. Finally, Amanda admitted she'd transferred Claire's entire college fund to her mother to prevent foreclosure on her mother's house. Amanda's mother, Patricia, has lived beyond her means for years. She bought a house she couldn't afford, constantly refinanced to pull out equity, and maxed out credit cards. She was facing foreclosure and had begged Amanda for help. Amanda had decided, without discussing with me, to give Patricia our daughter's college fund to save the house. I was furious. That money was for Claire's education, not for bailing out Patricia's decades of financial irresponsibility. Amanda claimed her mother was family, and we couldn't let her lose her house. I pointed out that Claire was also family, our own daughter, and we'd just stolen her college education to enable Patricia's continued poor financial management. The argument with Amanda escalated over days. She insisted I was being heartless about her mother's situation, and that family helps family. I countered that helping family doesn't mean sacrificing our daughter's education and financial future. Amanda had made a unilateral decision about jointly owned money without my consent, taking $118,000 we'd saved for our child and giving it to her financially irresponsible mother. I consulted with a family law attorney about recovering the money. The attorney said that technically, Amanda had legal authority to withdraw from the account since her name was on it, even though the withdrawal violated our mutual understanding that the money was untouchable for Claire's college. Recovering it would require either Patricia voluntarily returning it or going to court to prove misappropriation of funds meant for a specific purpose. I contacted Patricia directly, asking her to return the money. Patricia refused, saying Amanda had given it as a gift and she'd already used it to catch up on mortgage payments and past due bills. She claimed she'd pay it back eventually, but couldn't return it now. Patricia showed no recognition that she'd accepted her granddaughter's college fund, or that she had any responsibility to preserve education money meant for Claire. Claire found out about the missing college fund when I had to tell her we might need to postpone her enrollment while we figured out financing. She was devastated, not just about potentially missing college, but about learning her grandmother had taken her education fund and her mother had given it away. Claire confronted Amanda, who tried to defend the decision as helping family, but Claire saw through it as betrayal. Claire's relationship with both Amanda and Patricia is now severely damaged. She told Amanda she'll never forgive her for choosing grandma over her own daughter. She's refused to speak to Patricia at all, saying her grandmother stole her future. The family divisions this has created extend beyond just the money. It's about priorities and values, and who Amanda chose to protect when forced to choose. Amanda's siblings were horrified when they learned what happened. They've been trying to convince Patricia to return the money, pointing out she took her granddaughter's college fund. But Patricia is defensive, claiming she deserved help, and that Amanda offered the money freely. Patricia seems completely unconcerned about the damage this has caused to her relationship with Claire or to Amanda's marriage. I've filed for divorce. I can't stay married to someone who'd unilaterally give away our daughter's college fund without discussion. Amanda's decision demonstrated priorities I can't accept: her mother's comfort over our daughter's education. Amanda claims I'm overreacting and that we can figure out college financing together, but the trust is irreparably broken. 2 months into this nightmare, Claire is still starting college in August, but will need substantial student loans because her college fund is gone. She'll graduate with approximately $80,000 in debt that she'd have avoided if Amanda hadn't given away her education fund. Claire will spend years after college repaying loans for an education we'd fully funded before Amanda's betrayal. The divorce proceedings are contentious. My attorney is arguing that Amanda's unauthorized transfer of marital assets to her mother should be factored into settlement calculations. Essentially, that Amanda owes the marital estate $59,000, half of the $118,000 she gave away. Amanda's attorney claims the transfer was from a 529 account for our child's benefit, and therefore not marital property subject to division. The legal battle over categorizing the stolen college fund is expensive and bitter. Meanwhile, Claire is missing what should have been an exciting time preparing for college. Instead of focusing on her future, she's caught in her parents' divorce and facing loans she shouldn't need. Amanda's family has fractured over this situation. Her siblings have largely sided with me and Claire, saying Amanda made an indefensible choice that will harm Claire for years. Amanda's father told her directly that she'd betrayed her own daughter and made a choice he couldn't respect. Amanda is isolated from much of her own family over this decision. Patricia continues refusing to return any money, claiming financial hardship. She posted on Facebook about ungrateful children and grandchildren who don't appreciate sacrifice, completely oblivious to irony. Her post drew comments from people pointing out she'd taken her granddaughter's college fund, which Patricia dismissed as lies from people who don't know the full story. Claire is working a summer job to start building college funds herself, knowing she can't rely on her mother or grandmother. She's applied for every scholarship she can find. She's accepted that she'll be working through college and taking loans, starting adult life with debt because her mother chose enabling her financially irresponsible grandmother over protecting her daughter's education. I've started a GoFundMe to try to recover some of Claire's college fund, explaining the situation honestly. The campaign has raised about $12,000 from friends, extended family, and even strangers moved by Claire's story. It's far short of the $118,000 Amanda gave away, but it's something, and shows Claire that people outside her immediate family care about her future. Amanda sends messages blaming me for turning Claire against her, and claims I'm using the situation to manipulate our daughter. She takes no accountability for the actual problem, that she stole Claire's college fund to give to her mother without discussing with me or considering Claire's needs. Amanda's continued victim mentality makes reconciliation impossible, even if I were open to it. I'm sharing this story as a warning. Protect education funds with explicit agreements about access and use. Amanda legally could withdraw because her name was on the account, but clear terms about requiring both parents' consent might have prevented this. Also, be wary of enabling financially irresponsible relatives at the expense of your own children. Patricia's pattern of living beyond her means should have disqualified her from receiving help that required sacrificing Claire's education. Claire will recover from this betrayal and succeed despite the obstacles Amanda created. She's resilient and determined, qualities she'll need given she's starting college with substantial loans rather than the full funding we'd provided before Amanda gave it away. Our relationship is stronger than ever, while Amanda faces years of consequences from choosing her financially irresponsible mother over her own daughter's future. My wife's affair partner is my brother, and they're planning to raise my kids together. The soul-crushing discovery I made 2 weeks ago has shattered everything I believed about my life. My wife of 14 years has been having an affair with my younger brother, and I found detailed text messages where they're planning a future together that includes raising my 3 children as their family once I'm out of the picture. I'm Marcus, 45 years old, and I thought I had a solid marriage with my wife Lauren, 43. We have 3 kids, ages 12, 9, and 6. I work long hours as an emergency room physician, while Lauren works part-time as a yoga instructor. My brother Trevor, 41, has always been the family charmer, divorced twice, no kids, works in sales with an inconsistent income. 2 weeks ago, I came home early from a shifted hospital schedule and found Lauren's laptop open on the kitchen table. A text notification popped up from Trevor with, "Can't wait until we can finally be a real family." My stomach dropped. I opened their message thread and found 6 months of intimate conversations, explicit photos, and detailed planning for their future. They'd been having an affair for over a year. The messages showed they were meeting at hotels twice weekly, while I was at the hospital, and the kids were at school or with babysitters. But what destroyed me wasn't just the affair, it was their discussions about my children. Trevor wrote about how he'd always wanted to be a dad, and how my kids already loved him as their fun uncle. Lauren responded that the kids would adjust quickly once we divorced and Trevor moved in. They discussed custody arrangements, assuming I'd get standard every other weekend visitation due to my demanding work schedule. Trevor joked about finally having the ready-made family he'd always wanted without the baby years. They were planning to steal my life. My wife, my brother, and my children living together, while I became a weekend visitor in my own kids' lives. The betrayal from both of them simultaneously was incomprehensible. I'd trusted Lauren with everything, and I'd always supported Trevor financially and emotionally through his messy divorces. I took screenshots of everything and called a divorce attorney that same day. I also called my parents, who were devastated. My mother actually said, "I knew Trevor always envied your life, but I never thought he'd do something like this." I confronted Lauren when she got home. She initially tried to deny everything, then shifted to claiming she'd fallen out of love with me years ago and had found genuine connection with Trevor. She claimed they hadn't meant to hurt me, but couldn't help their feelings. She actually suggested we could handle this maturely with an amicable divorce. I asked her if she thought planning to take my children and play house with my brother while I became a peripheral figure in their lives was amicable. Lauren had the audacity to claim she was thinking of the children by giving them stability with her and Trevor, rather than disrupting their lives with shared custody arrangements. The conversation with Trevor was even worse. I called him and he actually tried to justify the affair by saying I was never really present for Lauren due to my work schedule, and that he'd been there for her emotionally in ways I couldn't be. He said my medical career had always come first, and Lauren deserved someone who prioritized her. The rationalization that my work as an ER physician, work that provided our comfortable lifestyle and my children's private schools, somehow justified betrayal was obscene. Trevor contributed nothing financially to anyone, but felt entitled to my wife and kids because he'd been available to take Lauren to lunch while I was saving lives in the emergency room. My parents have disowned Trevor completely. My father told him he's no longer welcome at family gatherings and that he's dead to them after betraying his brother this way. Trevor's response was to claim everyone was being dramatic and that people fall in love and I should be an adult about it. The divorce proceedings have begun, and I'm fighting for primary custody. Lauren assumed I'd accept standard visitation due to my schedule, but I've rearranged my hospital hours and have documented evidence that she was neglecting the children during affair meetings with Trevor. My attorney believes my chances for primary custody are strong. Lauren and Trevor's relationship is now public family knowledge, and both are facing social consequences. Lauren's yoga studio has received negative reviews mentioning her affair. Trevor has been confronted by other family members. My sister won't speak to either of them. Family gatherings are now split between Marcus's side and the two pariahs. My kids don't know the full details yet, but they're confused about why Uncle Trevor isn't around anymore and why Mommy and Daddy are getting divorced. I've told them age-appropriate versions, but eventually they'll learn the truth. The day my children understand their mother and uncle betrayed me together will be devastating for them. 3 months into this nightmare, I'm still processing the dual betrayal. Discovering your spouse's affair is devastating enough, but learning your own brother was the affair partner and that they were planning to essentially replace you in your children's lives is a unique form of trauma. Every family memory now feels contaminated by their deception. I've learned that the affair started at a family barbecue I hosted 18 months ago. Lauren and Trevor connected that day while I was grilling burgers for 20 relatives. They exchanged numbers just to coordinate family events and began messaging, which evolved into emotional affair and then physical. They conducted their relationship partially in my own home when I was at work. The custody battle is ugly. Lauren's attorney is arguing that my medical career makes me an absent parent who can't provide daily care for 3 children. My attorney is countering with evidence of Lauren's affair, her lies to the children about her whereabouts, and her documented neglect during the affair period. I have texts where she asked Trevor to pick up our youngest from school because she'd lost track of time at his apartment. Trevor has mostly disappeared from the situation. He's apparently realized that being the affair partner who destroyed his brother's marriage makes him universally despised. Lauren complains that Trevor has become distant since everything went public. Seems he wanted the fantasy of ready-made family, but not the reality of social consequences and complex custody arrangements. Lauren is now claiming she wants to reconcile, saying she made a terrible mistake and wants to save our marriage for the children. But her texts to Trevor contradict this. I've seen messages from just last week where she told him she's only claiming to want reconciliation to improve her custody position. She's manipulating everyone, including Trevor, who she's apparently still seeing secretly. I'm moving forward with divorce and fighting for my children. Lauren and Trevor's betrayal destroyed my marriage but won't destroy my relationship with my kids. They'll know eventually that I fought for them while their mother chose her affair over their stability. Trevor will remain the uncle who tried to steal his brother's family, and I'll rebuild a life free of people capable of such comprehensive betrayal. My daughter recorded me during arguments, then edited footage to get a restraining order. The legal disaster I'm facing has revealed that my 19-year-old daughter, Ashley, secretly recorded our family arguments, edited the footage to remove context and make me appear threatening, then used the manipulated videos to obtain a restraining order that's now affecting my custody of her younger siblings. I'm Catherine, 46, and Ashley has always been a difficult teenager, defiant, manipulative, angry about normal parental boundaries. Last year, she started recording family interactions on her phone. I didn't think much of it, assuming it was typical teenage documentation of everything. What I didn't know was that Ashley was specifically recording arguments and then editing the videos. She'd provoke confrontations, record my frustrated responses, then cut out her instigation and her own yelling to create clips where only my anger was visible. She compiled dozens of these edited clips over 6 months. Then, Ashley filed for a restraining order claiming I was emotionally abusive and volatile. She submitted her edited video compilation as evidence. The clips showed me yelling, showing frustration, and in one case pointing my finger during an argument. But all context was removed. You couldn't see Ashley's screaming, her refusal to follow basic rules, or her deliberately provocative behavior that preceded my reactions. The family court judge granted a temporary restraining order based on the videos. I'm now prohibited from contacting Ashley, and the order has triggered a custody review for my 2 younger children, ages 14 and 11. Child Protective Services is investigating whether I'm fit to parent based on Ashley's allegations and her edited video evidence. I've had to hire an expensive attorney. We've subpoenaed Ashley's phone and computer to get the original unedited footage, but the damage is done. The restraining order is public record. CPS is treating me as a potential abuser. My younger kids are being interviewed about whether they feel safe with me. Ashley is living with my ex-husband, who has always undermined my parenting. I suspect he encouraged this entire scheme. Ashley gets freedom from rules, while I'm facing potential loss of custody of her siblings based on deliberately manipulated evidence. The system believed edited videos over years of my being a devoted mother. My reputation is destroyed, and I'm fighting to prove the footage was manipulated, while Ashley faces no consequences for perjury or fraud. My sister stole my identity to take out loans and destroyed my credit score. The financial devastation I discovered last month has exposed that my younger sister Jennifer, who I helped support through college and let live with me rent-free for 2 years, stole my personal information to open credit cards and loans in my name, leaving me with $67,000 in debt I never incurred. I'm David, 44, and Jennifer is 38. I've always been the responsible sibling, good credit, stable job as an accountant, homeowner. Jennifer struggled financially, and I helped her repeatedly, paying her rent when she was short, lending her money she never repaid, letting her stay with me after her divorce. During the 2 years Jennifer lived with me, she apparently photographed my documents, memorized my social security number, and collected enough information to steal my identity. After moving out, she systematically opened credit accounts in my name over 18 months. I discovered it when I was denied a mortgage refinance. The lender said my credit score had dropped from 720 to 490 due to multiple delinquent accounts. I pulled my credit report and found 7 credit cards, 3 personal loans, and 1 auto loan. All in my name, none that I'd opened. Total debt was $67,000, most of it in collections. I filed police reports for identity theft. The investigation traced the accounts to Jennifer. Applications used her email address and phone number. Purchases were shipped to her address. The auto loan was for a car registered to her. When confronted, Jennifer admitted it, claiming she'd planned to pay everything back before I noticed. She'd spent the money on living expenses, her boyfriend's motorcycle, furniture, and vacations. She'd made minimum payments initially to avoid detection, then had stopped paying when she couldn't keep up with 7 accounts. Everything went delinquent and destroyed my credit. I'm now in the nightmare of trying to prove fraud to creditors while my own sister faces felony charges. Some creditors are cooperative. Others insist I'm responsible because I'm related to the perpetrator and should have protected my information. My credit is ruined. I can't refinance my mortgage, and I've spent thousands on attorneys. Jennifer has no assets to repay the debt. Even if she's convicted, I'm stuck with the financial wreckage. The sister I helped and trusted destroyed my financial life while I was providing her with housing and support. My wife had me declared mentally unfit so she could access my inheritance early. The nightmare I've been living for 3 months started when my wife Rachel convinced a judge I was mentally incompetent so she could become my guardian and access the $400,000 inheritance my parents left me with restrictions she couldn't otherwise bypass. I'm Michael, 47, and I have ADHD and anxiety, manageable conditions I've lived with while maintaining a successful career as an architect. Last year, my parents died in an accident, leaving me a substantial inheritance in a trust that Rachel couldn't touch directly. The trust required my explicit approval for withdrawals over $10,000, which frustrated Rachel, who wanted to use the money immediately for her business ventures. Rachel started documenting every time I forgot something or seemed distracted. She recorded me during anxiety attacks. She told my doctors I was becoming increasingly confused and unable to manage daily tasks, complete fabrications. She built a case file of alleged incompetence over 6 months. Then she filed for guardianship, claiming I was mentally unfit to manage my affairs. She brought her fabricated evidence to court. I was blindsided, served with papers claiming I needed a legal guardian because I was allegedly incompetent. My ADHD and anxiety were characterized as debilitating mental illness, rendering me unable to make decisions. The judge appointed Rachel as my guardian, giving her control over my finances, including the inheritance. She immediately started withdrawing funds for her business investments, essentially shopping sprees and luxury purchases I'd always said no to. She spent $80,000 in 3 months on things that have nothing to do with my care. I'm fighting to reverse the guardianship, but it's incredibly difficult. Once declared incompetent, the legal system treats you as such. My protests are viewed as lack of insight into my condition. Rachel tells the court I'm in denial about my limitations. The attorney I hired is facing an uphill battle. Meanwhile, Rachel controls everything: my bank accounts, my credit cards, even my ability to make medical decisions. She's restricted my access to money, claiming she's managing my spending for my own good. The inheritance my parents left to ensure my security is being drained by my wife, who engineered this whole situation. I'm trapped in a Kafkaesque nightmare where the person who's supposed to love me has legally stripped my autonomy to steal from me. And the system that's supposed to protect vulnerable people is instead being weaponized against me.